Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name is Daniel James Mercer, and I have 27 years old. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I work as an environmental engineer for a consulting firm. Life in the city had been wearing me down lately. The constant noise, the pollution, the endless stream of faces I'd never recognize again. That's why when my old college buddy, Liam, suggested we take a weekend trip to Savage River State Forest in western Maryland, I jumped at the chance. Liam brought along his girlfriend Vanessa, a quiet wildlife photographer with piercing green eyes and a habit of disappearing with her camera for hours. I'd only met her twice before, but something about her unsettled me. Maybe it was just how she could stare at something for so long without blinking. We also invited my cousin Mitchell, a former Army Ranger who'd recently returned from overseas with a haunted look that never quite left his eyes. The drive from Pittsburgh wasn't bad, about 3 hours of winding through increasingly remote countryside. The forest stretched across more than 54,000 acres of rugged terrain in Garrett County. We'd planned to car camp rather than pitch tents, converting Liam's old Subaru Outback into our mobile shelter. "It'll be safer," he'd said with a laugh that made me wonder what exactly we needed safety from out here. We arrived on Friday afternoon in early October. The forest was ablaze with autumn colors, vivid reds and golds that seemed almost unnatural in their intensity. The ranger station was closing as we pulled up, but the weathered man behind the desk gave us a map and pointed us toward a secluded spot near the Savage River. "Not many folks out there this time of year," he mentioned, his eyes lingering on our city clothes and clean gear. "Weather's been strange lately." The disturbing thing wasn't what he said, but how he said it, like he was warning us without actually saying the words. I brushed it off. After all, we were just there for 2 nights of simple car camping, drinking beers, and reconnecting. What could possibly go wrong in a state park less than 200 miles from home? We followed a narrow fire road deep into the woods, the path growing increasingly rough as we ventured further from the main areas. Mitchell navigated while I drove, finally directing us to pull off near a small clearing that sloped gently toward what I assumed was the river, though I couldn't see it through the dense trees. The air was unnaturally still when we stepped out. No birdsong, no wind rustling the leaves. Just silence. "Perfect spot," Liam announced, already pulling camping gear from the trunk. But as I helped unload our supplies, I noticed Vanessa standing at the edge of the clearing, her camera hanging and used around her neck, staring into the darkening forest. "There's something wrong with this place," she said quietly, more to herself than to us. I pretended not to hear her. The scary truth was, I'd felt it too the moment we'd stepped out of the car, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck like we were being watched. We set up our campsite efficiently, arranging the back of the Outback with sleeping bags and pillows for Liam and Vanessa, while Mitchell and I would sleep in my Honda CR-V. We built a small fire as the daylight faded, and I tried to shake off my unease by focusing on practical tasks, gathering wood, filtering water from our jugs, arranging the coolers to keep the food safe from animals. Normal camping stuff. But I couldn't help noticing how the darkness seemed to press in around our little fire circle, denser and more complete than city darkness ever was. The first night passed uneventfully, though none of us slept well. I blamed it on the adjustment to sleeping in a car, ignoring the fact that I'd done this dozens of times before without issue. We woke to a heavy mist that clung to the trees and muffled sounds in a way that made the forest feel even more isolated. Over a simple breakfast of instant coffee and protein bars, Liam suggested we hike to the river and maybe try some fishing. "There's supposed to be a waterfall about 2 miles west of here," he said, studying the park map. "We could make a day of it." Mitchell nodded enthusiastically, already pulling hiking gear from his backpack. I noticed Vanessa hadn't spoken all morning, her attention fixed on something at the edge of our campsite. When I followed her gaze, I saw nothing but trees and undergrowth. We decided to leave our campsite set up and take just the essentials for our hike. As I locked my car, I realized I hadn't had cell service since we turned off the main road yesterday. "Anyone getting any bars?" I asked, holding up my useless phone. Mitchell and Liam both checked theirs and shook their heads. "Guess we're officially off-grid." Liam laughed, but there was an edge to his voice that made me wonder if he was as comfortable with that as he pretended to be. The hike started pleasantly enough, following what appeared to be a game trail that roughly aligned with the map's indication of a path to the river. The forest was beautiful in the daylight, ancient trees reaching skyward, undergrowth thick with ferns and wildflowers. But about an hour in, Mitchell stopped suddenly, holding up his hand in a military gesture that instantly silenced us. "Do you smell that?" he asked quietly. I inhaled deeply, picking up the usual forest scents: earth, vegetation, the slight mustiness of fall decay. But underneath it all was something else, something rotten and chemical that didn't belong. "Probably just a dead animal," Liam suggested, but Mitchell was already moving off the trail, following the scent. Reluctantly, we followed him. What we found in the small clearing wasn't a dead animal. It was the remains of another campsite, and it had been destroyed. A tent lay in shreds, sleeping bags and personal items scattered across a wide area as if thrown by some tremendous force. A camping stove was crushed, the metal twisted and bent. Most disturbing of all, there were long, deep gouges in the surrounding trees, about 7 feet up the trunks. "Bear," Vanessa whispered, finally breaking her silence. Mitchell shook his head slowly. "Bears don't do this kind of damage, and they don't take people's clothes and leave the food." He was right. The cooler was still there, untouched, but there was no sign of whoever had been camping here. No blood, either, which I supposed was something. Just abandoned, destroyed gear and that lingering, unnatural smell. We should have turned back then. Every horror movie I'd ever seen flashed through my mind, screaming at me to grab my friends and run back to our cars. But Liam, always the practical one, suggested we report it to the rangers. "The station is probably farther than our campsite at this point," he reasoned. "Let's continue to the river, then head back and drive to the ranger station before dark." The decision was made with a casualness that seems unbelievable to me now. We continued our hike, though the mood had darkened considerably. Mitchell took the lead, his body language changing to something more alert, more predatory. I found myself jumping at every snapping twig, every rustle in the undergrowth. The forest that had seemed so beautiful just an hour ago now felt oppressive, hiding secrets in its shadows. We reached the river around noon, though the sky had darkened with gathering clouds, making it feel later. The waterfall was indeed beautiful, water cascading over moss-covered rocks into a clear pool below. Under different circumstances, it would have been a perfect spot for photos and a leisurely lunch. Instead, we ate quickly, barely speaking, all of us eager to start back. The rain started just as we began our return journey, a light drizzle that quickly intensified into a steady downpour. Within minutes, the trail became slick with mud, visibility reduced to mere yards ahead. We huddled under a hastily deployed tarp, debating whether to wait it out or push on. That's when we heard it, a sound that didn't belong in any forest I'd ever visited. A low, mechanical grinding, like metal on metal, echoing through the trees. "What the hell is that?" Liam hissed, his face pale in the dim light. Mitchell was already on his feet, peering into the rain-blurred forest. "Logging equipment, maybe?" Vanessa suggested, but her voice trembled with uncertainty. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a high-pitched whine that made the hair on my arms stand up. "We need to move," Mitchell said firmly, already packing the tarp away. "That's not natural, and it's not forestry work. Not in this weather, not in a state park." We abandoned any pretense of following the trail, instead making a direct line toward where we thought our campsite should be. The rain made navigation nearly impossible. Landmarks disappeared in the gray curtain of water, and the sun was hidden behind thick clouds. After 20 minutes of slogging through increasingly difficult terrain, I realized with growing horror that we were lost. The trees all looked the same, the ground sloped in unfamiliar ways, and that terrible grinding sound continued to echo around us, sometimes seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Mitchell stopped suddenly, holding up his hand again. We froze, straining to hear over the drumming of rain on leaves. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, and too widely spaced to be human. They were coming toward us, accompanied by a rhythmic clicking that reminded me absurdly of a dog's nails on hardwood. Except this was no dog. Even through the rain, I could smell that same chemical odor from the destroyed campsite, stronger now, mixed with something metallic. "Run," Mitchell whispered, his voice tight with controlled fear. "Split up and run. Head downhill. You'll hit the river eventually. Follow it upstream to the waterfall, then backtrack to our campsite." Before any of us could argue, he darted away to the right, deliberately making noise, drawing whatever it was toward him instead of us. Panic exploded in my chest. Liam grabbed Vanessa's hand, and they took off to the left. I stood paralyzed for precious seconds before my survival instinct kicked in, sending me straight ahead, away from the approaching sounds. I ran blindly through the forest, slipping on wet leaves, branches whipping at my face and arms. The rain had soaked through every layer of clothing, chilling me to the bone, but I barely noticed. I don't know how long I ran before I had to stop, my lungs burning, legs trembling with exhaustion. I crouched behind a fallen tree, trying to control my ragged breathing enough to listen. The forest had gone eerily quiet. No rain sounds, no wind, no animals. Just my heartbeat thundering in my ears. And then, a scream. Distant but unmistakable. Human. Female. Vanessa. The sound was cut off abruptly, leaving a silence more terrifying than any noise could be. I pressed myself lower to the ground, irrationally believing I could somehow disappear into the earth itself. My mind raced with horrific possibilities of what might have happened to her, to Liam, to Mitchell. Were they dead? Captured? By what? The questions paralyzed me with fear. The sky was darkening rapidly, whether from the storm or approaching evening. I couldn't tell. Being alone in these woods after dark was a death sentence. I was certain of that now. I had to find my way back to the campsite, back to my car. I had to get help. Orienting myself as best I could, I headed downhill as Mitchell had instructed, moving as quietly as possible despite my shaking limbs. I nearly cried with relief when I heard the rushing water of the river ahead. Following it upstream would lead me back toward the waterfall, and from there I could find our campsite. As I approached the bank, something caught my eye, a splash of unnatural color against the browns and greens of the forest. Vanessa's bright blue camera strap caught on a branch overhanging the water. Of Vanessa herself, there was no sign. The sight of Vanessa's camera sent a wave of nausea through me. I grabbed it, hoping against hope to find some clue about what had happened to her. The camera itself was intact, protected by its waterproof case. With trembling fingers, I switched it on and scrolled through the most recent photos. Most were typical nature shots, trees, fungi, the waterfall we'd visited. But the last 3 images made my blood run cold. They had been taken right here, by the river, in rapid succession. The first showed nothing unusual, just the water and rocks. The second captured a dark shape at the edge of the frame, blurred by motion. The third was clear enough to haunt me forever. A tall, emaciated figure standing half submerged in the river, its skin a sickly gray-white, arms unnaturally long, ending in what looked like metal rather than flesh. Its face was mostly hidden by lank, dark hair, but what I could see wasn't human. Not entirely. I dropped the camera as if it had burned me, then immediately snatched it back up. This was evidence. This was proof of something. Something that shouldn't exist, but clearly did. I secured the camera in my pocket and continued upstream, moving faster now despite my exhaustion. The lingering daylight was fading quickly, and I had no flashlight, no way to navigate in darkness. The forest grew denser as I followed the river, the terrain more difficult. Several times I had to climb over massive fallen trees or wade through shallow sections where the path disappeared. All the while, I strained my ears for any sound of pursuit, any hint of that grinding metal noise or those 2 heavy footsteps. The silence was almost worse. It meant I wouldn't hear whatever was hunting us until it was too late. Night had fully descended by the time I spotted a faint orange glow through the trees ahead. Fire. Our campfire. I approached cautiously, ready to retreat at the first sign of danger. As I drew closer, relief flooded through me. It was indeed our campsite, and Mitchell was there, stoking the flames higher. His face was streaked with dirt and what looked like blood, his clothing torn and wet. "Thank God," he breathed when he saw me. "Liam? Vanessa?" I shook my head, watching his expression harden. "I found this," I said, showing him the camera. "And I heard Vanessa scream." Mitchell nodded grimly. "I know. I heard it too. I've been here about an hour, hoping you all would find your way back." He glanced nervously at the darkened forest around us. We need to leave. Now. We quickly gathered what essential supplies we could, abandoning the rest. As Mitchell siphoned gas from Liam's abandoned Subaru into my CRV, I scrolled through Vanessa's camera again, showing him the disturbing final images. He barely reacted, as if he'd expected something like this. When I was overseas, he said quietly, I heard stories from locals about government experiments gone wrong. Things released into remote areas because they couldn't be contained anymore. What are you saying? I demanded, though a part of me already knew. The chemical smell, the metallic sounds, the inhuman strength evident in the destroyed campsite. I'm saying whatever's out there isn't natural, Mitchell replied, his voice flat. And it's hunting us. We were almost ready to leave when we heard crashing in the underbrush nearby. Mitchell immediately doused the fire, plunging us into darkness. We crouched by my car, barely breathing, as the sounds grew closer. Then, an unmistakable voice. Daniel. Mitchell. It was Liam, stumbling into the clearing, alone and clearly injured. His left arm hung useless at his side, his face a mask of blood from a gash across his forehead. We rushed to him, dragging him toward the car. Vanessa, he gasped. It took Vanessa. I tried to stop it, but he broke down, shaking uncontrollably. We bundled him into the back seat of my CRV, Mitchell already sliding behind the wheel. I was too rattled to drive. Just as Mitchell started the engine, the grinding sound returned, louder than ever, coming from all around us. Go, I shouted, as dark shapes emerged from the trees at the edge of our headlights' reach. Mitchell floored it, the car fishtailing wildly before finding traction on the muddy fire road. We sped through the forest, branches scraping against the windows, the headlights illuminating only a few yards of treacherous path ahead. Behind us, those inhuman figures gave chase, moving with a speed that defied their awkward, jerking gait. The drive out was a nightmare of near misses and desperate maneuvers. Twice we almost rolled the car on sharp turns, and once we had to crash through a fallen branch blocking our path. The entire time, Liam alternated between semi-conscious mumbling and gut-wrenching sobs. What little I could make out was about Vanessa, how they'd been separated when they ran, how he'd gone back to look for her, and found her being dragged away by something with too many joints. We'd almost reached the main park road when one of the creatures lunged from the darkness directly into our path. Mitchell swerved hard, sending us into a skid that ended with the passenger side of the car slamming into a tree. The impact was deafening, glass shattering as the airbags deployed. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard Mitchell shouting for me to move, to get out. I fumbled with my seatbelt, my fingers numb and clumsy. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks, but through it I could see them coming, 3 tall figures moving with that same jerking gait, approaching the disabled car. Mitchell was already out, yanking open the rear door to pull Liam from the back seat. I finally freed myself and stumbled out just as one of the creatures reached the car. In the harsh glare of the one remaining headlight, I got my first clear look at our pursuers. Mitchell had been right. They weren't natural, weren't fully organic. Their limbs were a disturbing hybrid of flesh and crude mechanical components, their movements accompanied by that grinding sound I'd come to dread. Where faces should have been, there were only vague suggestions of features, as if someone had tried to sculpt humanity from memory and failed horribly. What happened next is still a blur of adrenaline and terror. Mitchell had a hunting knife, something I hadn't even known he'd brought along. He shoved Liam and me behind him, facing the approaching creatures with a steady hand that belied the hopelessness of our situation. Run for the road, he ordered. It's less than a quarter mile. Flag down a car, get to the ranger station. We're not leaving you, Liam protested weakly, barely able to stand. Mitchell gave us a look I'll never forget, resolute, accepting, almost peaceful. Yes, you are. Then he charged the nearest creature, driving his knife into what might have been its throat. The thing made a horrible screeching sound, thrashing wildly as black fluid poured from the wound. I grabbed Liam's good arm and ran, half dragging him toward where I thought the main road should be. Behind us came sounds no human throat could make, interspersed with Mitchell's shouts of defiance. I didn't look back. Couldn't. Every ounce of my being was focused on escape, on survival, on getting Liam to safety. We stumbled through the darkness, the rain having stopped, but leaving everything treacherously slick. Liam was fading fast, his weight becoming harder to support with each step. Just when I thought we couldn't go any further, I saw it, the glint of asphalt ahead, wet and shining in the moonlight that now broke through the clouds. The main park road. Salvation. We reached the edge of the road and collapsed, gasping for breath. In the distance, headlights approached, a park ranger's truck, making late rounds. I staggered to my feet, waving frantically. The truck slowed, then stopped beside us. The ranger's face a mask of shock as he took in our bedraggled, bloodied appearance. "My friend needs medical attention," I gasped, gesturing to Liam. "And there's another friend back there, he's—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The ranger was already radioing for backup, for an ambulance, his free hand on the shotgun mounted in his truck. He helped us into the vehicle, locking the doors immediately. "What happened to you boys?" he demanded, eyes scanning the dark forest edge. I opened my mouth to explain, then realized how insane it would sound. Hybrid creatures? Government experiments? I'd be dismissed as hysterical, traumatized, or worse. "We were attacked," I said instead. "Our car crashed. Our friend Mitchell stayed behind to hold them off." "Them?" the ranger asked sharply. Something in his tone made me look closer at him, at the way his hand tightened on his shotgun, at the knowledge in his eyes. He'd seen something in these woods before. He knew. "You've encountered them too, haven't you?" I whispered. The ranger's grim expression was answer enough. "We don't go to that part of the forest after dark," he said finally. "Not since they built that research facility up in the mountains 10 years ago. Not since the accident they never properly explained." More headlights appeared, another ranger vehicle, an ambulance following close behind. As paramedics loaded Liam into the ambulance, I heard the rangers organizing a search party for Mitchell and Vanessa. I knew with sickening certainty they wouldn't find them. Not alive, anyway. The official report called it a bear attack. Liam and I were treated for exposure, lacerations, and in his case, a broken arm. The rangers found no sign of Mitchell or Vanessa, despite an extensive search. Liam's Subaru was recovered, but my CRV had mysteriously disappeared from the crash site. The destroyed campsite we discovered was never mentioned. 3 weeks after we returned home, a small package arrived at my apartment. No return address, no note inside. Just a USB drive containing a single video file and a set of coordinates deep in the Maryland mountains. The video showed what appeared to be a secure facility built into a hillside, surrounded by electric fencing. The footage was shaky, taken from a distance, but clear enough to show figures being transported from unmarked vans into the building. Figures that moved with that same jerking gait I'd come to fear. I never told Liam about the package. He was still recovering, still waking up screaming Vanessa's name every night. Instead, I took the information to a journalist I trusted, someone with resources and connections I lacked. She promised to investigate discreetly. 2 days later, she was killed in what police called a random mugging gone wrong. The USB drive was missing from her belongings. That same night, I saw a black SUV parked across from my apartment building, 2 men in suits watching my windows. They followed me to work the next day, not even trying to be subtle about it. The message was clear: forget what you saw, or you'll disappear too. Like Mitchell, like Vanessa, like the journalist whose only crime was believing me. So I've stayed quiet, played along, pretended to accept the official story. But I've been preparing too, gathering resources, making connections with people who've had similar experiences. There are more of us than you might think. I'm leaving Pittsburgh tomorrow. This account is my insurance policy, my dead man's switch. If you're reading it, it means either I've found proof the world can't ignore, or I've joined the growing list of people who've vanished after asking too many questions about what really lurks in the forests of Western Maryland. Either way, remember this: there are things in those woods that shouldn't exist, things neither fully human nor fully machine. And whatever created them is still out there, still experimenting, still covering its tracks. If you go camping in Savage River State Forest, stick to the designated areas. Don't venture off trail. And if you smell something chemical on the wind, if you hear metal grinding against metal in a place where no machinery should be, run. Run, and don't look back. My name is Daniel Robert Fletcher, and I have 32 years old. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I work as an architectural designer for a mid-sized firm. My life has always been about clean lines, measured spaces, and calculated risks. That was until last summer when everything I believed about order and predictability collapsed around me like a house of cards. It was my college roommate Aiden who suggested the trip to Patapsco Valley State Park in Maryland. We hadn't seen each other in almost 5 years, and he thought camping would be the perfect way to reconnect. Aiden had always been the adventurous one, dragging me out of my comfort zone since our freshman year. He'd recently divorced and needed to clear his head. His sister Meredith decided to join us too, bringing along her new boyfriend Trevor, whom none of us had met before. The plan seemed simple enough. We'd drive down separately, meet at the park's Orange Grove area, and spend 3 days car camping. I'd recently purchased a Toyota 4Runner specifically for such occasions, though I'd barely taken it beyond city limits. The spacious back was perfect for sleeping, and I'd invested in a platform bed setup that left storage underneath. I even splurged on a portable refrigerator that ran off the car battery. I was, perhaps naively, excited about the trip. I left Pittsburgh early on a Friday morning in June, the summer sun already beating down with unusual intensity. The weather report promised temperatures in the high 90s all weekend, uncommon for this time of year in Maryland. The drive was pleasant enough, with stops at roadside diners and gas stations that grew increasingly rural as I approached my destination. I found myself relaxing as the cityscape faded in my rearview mirror. The park was busier than I expected when I arrived around 2 in the afternoon. Families with children, groups of friends, and solo campers all milled about the entrance. I followed the winding road deeper into the park, noticing how the dense trees immediately blocked out much of the sunlight, creating an unsettling premature dusk beneath their canopy. The temperature dropped several degrees as I drove further in, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat. I found our designated meeting spot first, a clearing with enough space for our vehicles, nestled against a backdrop of towering oak trees. The Patapsco River rushed somewhere nearby. I could hear its constant murmur through the trees. I parked and began unpacking, occasionally checking my phone for messages from the others. Reception was spotty at best, bars of service appearing and disappearing with frustrating inconsistency. Aiden arrived next, his beaten-up Jeep Wrangler announcing itself with a distinctive rumble before I could see it. He looked thinner than I remembered, with new lines etched around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But his smile was the same, wide and genuine as he crushed me in a bear hug. "Dan the man," he laughed, using my old college nickname. "Ready to rough it like the old days?" Meredith and Trevor arrived just before sunset in a sleek black Range Rover that looked laughably out of place among the trees. Meredith resembled her brother, same amber eyes and easy smile, but Trevor was a stark contrast to our group. Tall, impeccably dressed even for camping, with a perpetual look of calculation behind his eyes. He shook my hand firmly, his grip lingering a beat too long, his gaze never quite meeting mine. Something about him immediately set me on edge, though I couldn't articulate why. As darkness fell, and we set up our respective car sleeping arrangements, I couldn't shake the disturbing feeling that we were being watched. Occasionally, when conversation lulled, I'd catch movements in my peripheral vision, just beyond the reach of our campfire's light. But when I turned to look directly, there was never anything there. Just the endless dark spaces between trees, and the increasingly troubling sensation that something in those spaces was looking back. We woke to the sound of rain pattering against our vehicles. It wasn't in the forecast, but Maryland weather in June can be unpredictable. The clearing had transformed overnight, becoming a maze of puddles and mud. Our original plan to hike the Cascade Falls Trail was quickly shelved as the rain intensified, drumming against the roof of my 4Runner with increasing urgency. We could drive into Ellicott City for the day, Meredith suggested, over a meager breakfast of granola bars and lukewarm coffee. The rain had made it impossible to light our portable stove, wait out the storm and civilization. Her voice held a note of hope that none of us were cruel enough to extinguish. Trevor, however, had other ideas. "I've been tracking this storm system," he announced, showing us his phone screen with a weather app one didn't recognize. "It's just passing through. Should clear up by noon." He spoke with such authority that none of us questioned him, though I noticed Aiden's skeptical glance at the ominous dark clouds above. We decided to wait it out, retreating to our respective vehicles as the rain turned torrential. I spent the morning reading a thriller I'd brought along, occasionally glancing at Aiden's Jeep, where he and Meredith seemed engaged in an intense conversation. Trevor had wandered off, claiming he needed to scout the area despite the downpour. His absence was a relief, though I felt guilty admitting it even to myself. Around 11, just as Trevor had predicted, the rain began to ease. By noon, weak sunlight filtered through the trees, creating a misty, otherworldly atmosphere in our clearing. The sudden silence after hours of rainfall was disconcerting. I realized I couldn't hear birds or insects, just the distant rush of the river, now surely swollen from the storm. "Let's check out the river," Aiden suggested, clearly eager to escape the confines of his Jeep. It should be running high after all this rain. None of us mentioned that Trevor hadn't returned, though I caught Meredith checking her phone repeatedly as we gathered supplies for our impromptu expedition. The path to the river was treacherous after the rain, mud sucking at our boots with each step. The park felt different now, empty of other campers, as if we were the only souls foolish enough to stay through the storm. As we descended toward the water, I noticed strange markings carved into several trees, crude symbols I didn't recognize, fresh enough that the exposed wood hadn't darkened with age. "Hey, look at these," I called to Aiden, but he was already ahead, his attention fixed on something at the river's edge. When I caught up, I saw what had stopped him in his tracks. The Patapsco, usually a gentle, meandering river, had transformed into a raging torrent of muddy water. But that wasn't what had captured Aiden's attention. At the edge of the water lay a pile of clothing, a jacket that looked disturbingly similar to the one Trevor had been wearing that morning. "That's not," Meredith began, her voice faltering as she recognized the clothing. We spread out along the bank, calling Trevor's name, our voices swallowed by the roar of the water. No response came. Aiden waded into the shallows to retrieve the jacket, confirming our fears. It was definitely Trevor's, soaked through and covered in a strange, dark substance that didn't look like mud. "We need to call park rangers," I said, already pulling out my phone. No service. Aiden and Meredith checked theirs with the same result. The storm must have affected the cell towers, or perhaps we were simply in a dead zone. Either way, we were cut off. A decision needed to be made. "We should go back to the campsite," Aiden said finally. "Maybe Trevor returned while we were gone. If not, one of us can drive to the ranger station." His voice was steady, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Something about this situation felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. As we turned to head back, I noticed something half buried in the mud near the river's edge, a small leather-bound notebook that seemed out of place among the natural debris. I picked it up, intending to check if it belonged to Trevor, but something made me slip it into my pocket without showing the others. An inexplicable instinct I would later wish I'd ignored. The return journey to our campsite seemed longer, the forest around us unnaturally quiet save for the occasional distant sound that might have been a branch breaking or footsteps keeping pace with us just beyond the trees. Twice I turned, certain I saw movement following us, but each time there was nothing visible in the undergrowth. Just shadows and the growing certainty that something had gone very wrong in these woods. Our campsite was exactly as we'd left it, and there was no sign of Trevor. The clouds had returned, darker now, casting our clearing in premature twilight. We called another search party, splitting up to cover more ground, with plans to meet back at the cars within an hour. Aiden headed west, Meredith took the path toward the ranger station, and I volunteered to check the river again, secretly hoping to investigate the strange markings I'd noticed on the trees. Once alone, I pulled out the notebook I'd found. The leather cover was weathered, the pages within filled with handwritten entries that made my blood run cold. They detailed observations of our group, arrival times, sleeping arrangements, even conversations we'd had around the campfire. The final entry, dated that morning, read simply, "D. Fletcher shows potential. Others expendable. Begin tonight." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, finding detailed accounts of other groups that had camped in this same spot over the past year. Groups that, according to newspaper clippings tucked into the notebook, had gone missing without a trace. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. Trevor wasn't a victim. He was hunting us. But why leave his jacket? Why abandon this notebook? Unless he wasn't working alone. I shoved the notebook back into my pocket and ran toward our campsite, desperate to warn the others before it was too late. I arrived breathless to find Meredith had already returned, sitting alone by her Range Rover. "Any sign of Trevor?" she asked, her voice hollow with worry. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Before I could decide, Aiden emerged from the trees, but something about his gait was wrong, stiff, mechanical, his face blank as he approached us. "Aiden," I called, stepping forward. He didn't respond, continuing his strange approach until he stood at the edge of our clearing. Then he smiled, but it wasn't Aiden's smile. It was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth, his eyes empty of recognition. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, but the voice that emerged wasn't entirely his. It had a strange, multi-tone quality, as if several people were speaking at once. Meredith screamed, backing away toward her vehicle. "That's not my brother," she whispered, her voice breaking with horror. "Oh God, that's not Aiden." I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward my 4Runner. "We need to leave. Now." I fumbled for my keys as Aiden, or whatever was wearing Aiden's skin, began to convulse, his body contorting in ways that defied human anatomy. Behind him, more figures emerged from the trees. Park rangers, hikers, families with children, all moving with that same wrong gait, all wearing that same terrible smile. As we scrambled into my vehicle, I caught a glimpse of Trevor standing at the edge of the clearing, perfectly still, watching with clinical detachment as the others advanced. When our eyes met, he gave me a slight nod, as if acknowledging a fellow predator. That's when I understood the meaning of his note. Fletcher shows potential. Whatever was happening here, Trevor had decided I should be part of it rather than a victim of it. The thought filled me with such revulsion that I almost didn't notice Meredith wasn't beside me anymore. She had frozen halfway to the car, staring at something in the trees that I couldn't see. "Meredith!" I screamed, but she didn't react, her gaze fixed and her expression one of absolute terror. Then, with mechanical precision, she turned and began walking toward her brother, that same wrong smile spreading across her face. I had seconds to decide, try to save her and likely join whatever fate had claimed my friends, or save myself. With a sick feeling of guilt and fear, I slammed my car door, started the engine, and floored the accelerator, tires spitting mud as I swerved around the gathered figures and onto the narrow park road. In my rearview mirror, I saw them all turn in unison to watch me go, their movements synchronized, their faces blank masks beneath those terrible smiles. The park road twisted through the darkening forest, my headlights creating a tunnel of visibility that seemed to close in with each passing second. I drove recklessly, taking corners too fast, the 4Runner fishtailing in the mud left by the storm. My phone still showed no service, but the GPS was working. I just needed to reach the main highway, then find help, alert authorities about what was happening at the campsite. I was less than a mile from the park exit when my headlights illuminated a figure standing in the middle of the road, a park ranger, hands raised in a gesture to stop. I slowed instinctively, before noticing his too wide smile, the unnatural stillness of his posture. My foot hit the accelerator again, but too late. The engine sputtered and died, dashboard lights flaring before going dark. The car rolled to a stop 20 feet from the ranger, who began walking toward me with that same wrong gait. Panic rising in my throat, I tried the ignition again and again, but nothing happened. Through the windshield, I watched more figures emerge from the trees on either side of the road. Hikers, campers, more rangers, all converging on my vehicle with that same terrible coordination. Among them was Meredith, her face expressionless save for that hideous smile. I grabbed my backpack, shoving the leather notebook inside, and crawled into the back of my 4Runner. The platform bed I'd installed left a small space underneath, just enough for a person to hide. I slid into the cramped space as the first figures reached my car, pressing myself against the far side, away from the doors. Above me, I heard hands scratching at the windows, the dull thud of bodies pressing against metal. Then came the sound of breaking glass. They'd smashed a window. Hands reached into the car, groping blindly, searching. I held my breath, pressing myself flatter against the floor, feeling the cold metal against my cheek. Something warm dripped onto my face from above, a liquid seeping through the cracks in the platform bed. It smelled metallic, like copper, like blood. The searching hands withdrew, and for a moment I thought they might give up. Then I heard a new voice, Trevor's, calm and methodical. The trackers show he's still in the vehicle. Check underneath. My heart nearly stopped. Trackers? Had Trevor planted something on me? I frantically searched my clothing, finding nothing, before remembering the notebook. I yanked it from my backpack, flipping through the pages until I found a small device taped to the inside back cover, no bigger than a button. With trembling hands, I peeled it off and crushed it between my fingers, but it was too late. The rear hatch of my 4Runner was being opened. In desperation, I kicked out the panel on the far side of the platform bed, creating a small opening to the outside. It was barely large enough for me to squeeze through, but I had no choice. I wriggled out, dropping to the ground on the opposite side from where they were searching, and rolled underneath the car. From this vantage point, I could see dozens of pairs of feet surrounding my vehicle, standing unnaturally still. None of them were looking down. I began to inch my way toward the front of the car, planning to roll out and make a run for the dense forest beyond the road. That's when I noticed something strange, a pattern of roots or fungi spreading across the ground, connecting to each pair of feet around my car. The tendrils pulsed with a faint bioluminescence, barely visible in the gathering dark. They seemed to be emerging from deeper in the forest, from the direction of our campsite. As I watched, horrified, one tendril began to creep toward my outstretched hand. I jerked back, but not before it brushed my fingertips, sending a jolt of electric pain up my arm. Visions flooded my mind. A vast underground network, ancient and aware, spreading beneath the park. Hundreds of empty human shells walking the forests, their consciousness subsumed into the greater whole. Trevor, somehow immune, acting as its agent, selecting new additions to the collective. The momentary connection broke as I yanked my hand away, but the damage was done. They knew exactly where I was now. With no other option, I rolled out from under the far side of the car and ran blindly into the forest, away from the road, away from the advancing figures. I could hear them pursuing, moving through the undergrowth with unnatural speed and coordination, communicating without words. The forest grew denser, the ground sloping steeply downward. I stumbled on exposed roots, branches whipping at my face as I ran. The sound of pursuit never faded. If anything, it seemed to come from all directions now, as if the forest itself was closing in around me. My lungs burned, my legs threatened to give out, but terror kept me moving forward, deeper into the darkness. Ahead, I saw a glimmer of water, the Patapsco River again, swollen and raging from the storm. I'd run in a circle where the river had curved back around. Either way, I was trapped between the water and my pursuers. The riverbank was steep here, a sheer drop of at least 20 feet to the churning water below. Behind me, the first of my pursuers emerged from the trees. Aiden, or what had once been Aiden, his movements fluid but wrong, his eyes reflecting the faint bioluminescence of the tendrils that now visibly pulsed beneath his skin. I backed away, feeling loose soil crumble beneath my heels at the edge of the bank. Aiden stopped a few yards away, watching me with that terrible smile. "Join us, Daniel," he said in that multi-voiced tone. "It doesn't hurt. Not for long." Behind him, more figures emerged from the trees. Meredith, park rangers, other campers, forming a semicircle around me. And behind them all, Trevor, watching with cold interest. "What are you?" I gasped, playing for time, trying desperately to find a way out. The bank continued to crumble beneath my feet. Any moment now, I'd fall into the raging river below. Perhaps that was preferable to the alternative. "We are ancient," the thing wearing Aiden's face replied. "We have always been here. Sometimes sleeping, sometimes feeding. Trevor helps us choose. Trevor thinks you could help too." It took a step closer. "Your mind is strong. You would retain more of yourself than the others." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the water below. Something large breaking the surface momentarily before disappearing again. Not human, not animal, something else entirely. With sudden, horrible clarity, I understood. The river. Whatever this thing was, it lived in the river, spreading outward through the soil, the roots, the trees. In that moment, I made my choice. Better to die my own man than live as a puppet to this thing. I stepped backward deliberately, feeling the bank give way beneath my weight. As I fell, I saw surprise register on Aiden's face, quickly replaced by that empty smile again. The last thing I heard before hitting the water was Trevor's voice, raised in alarm for the first time. No, we need him intact. Then there was only the shock of cold water, the powerful current dragging me under, spinning me until I lost all sense of direction. I fought to the surface, gasping for air, before being pulled under again. In the murky depths, I caught glimpses of pale, elongated shapes moving toward me. Not human, but humanoid, with too many limbs and eyes that glowed with the same bioluminescence I'd seen in the forest. The river wasn't my escape. It was the heart of whatever horror had claimed my friends. I don't remember how I escaped the river. My memories are fragmented after that point. Flashes of swimming against an impossible current, of pale limbs reaching for me from the depths, of somehow finding a fallen tree that created a natural bridge across a narrower section of the river. I remember running through the forest in blind panic, soaked and shivering, until I stumbled onto a highway where a startled trucker picked me up. I told the authorities everything, about Trevor, about my friends, about the things in the river and the forest. They found my 4Runner where I'd abandoned it, windows broken, interior covered in a strange, fungal growth that the hazmat team refused to let anyone approach without full protective gear. They found no trace of Aiden or Meredith or any of the other people I described. The campsite was empty, with no evidence anyone had stayed there recently, despite the clear tire tracks from our vehicles. The official report classified it as a mass disappearance, possibly linked to several similar incidents in parks across Maryland over the past decade. Toxicology tests found traces of an unknown compound in my bloodstream, which led many to dismiss my account as hallucinations caused by contaminated water or fungal spores. Trevor Keller, they informed me, didn't exist. No records, no identity, nothing. It was as if Meredith had arrived alone. 3 people were eventually found downstream, not my friends, but campers reported missing weeks earlier. Their bodies were bloated and partially decomposed, with strange growths emerging from their eye sockets and mouths. Officials attributed this to normal decomposition accelerated by unusual bacteria in the river. The Parks Department temporarily closed several sections of Patapsco Valley State Park for environmental assessment, but they reopened within months, declaring no unusual findings. I spent 6 weeks in a psychiatric facility after my breakdown, as my family politely refers to it. When I was released, I moved from Pittsburgh to Northern California, as far from Maryland as I could reasonably go. I changed my name, deleted my social media, cut ties with everyone from my former life. It wasn't enough. 3 days ago, I received a package at my new address. A package that shouldn't have been possible, addressed to Daniel Fletcher, a name I haven't used in over a year. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook identical to the one I found by the river, the one I lost during my escape. The first page held only a short message in handwriting I recognized immediately as Trevor's. "We're still waiting for you. The water is everywhere. Last night, I noticed a leak in my bathroom, a small puddle forming on the tile floor, spreading from beneath the sink. When I knelt to check the pipes, I saw it, a faint blue-green glow emanating from the drain, the same bioluminescence I remembered from the forest. And in the water, tiny tendrils were beginning to form, reaching outward across my bathroom floor. I'm writing this now from a motel room 50 miles away, but I know it won't be far enough. I've seen the same glow in the sink here, in puddles in the parking lot after last night's rain. The water is everywhere, just as Trevor promised. And in every reflective surface, windows, mirrors, the screen of my laptop as I type this, I occasionally catch glimpses of familiar faces watching me. Aiden, Meredith, others I don't recognize, all wearing that same terrible smile. I won't be taken, not like they were. I've purchased a gun, a decision that would have been unthinkable to the Daniel Fletcher who left Pittsburgh for a camping trip last summer. When they come for me, and I know now that they will, I'll at least face the end on my terms. If you're reading this, stay away from Patapsco Valley State Park. Stay away from any still water in Maryland. And if you meet someone whose smile seems just a little too wide, whose movements seem just a little too fluid, run. Don't look back. Don't hesitate. Just run. But know this. In the end, it may not matter how far or how fast you run, because the water is everywhere. And they're patient. So very, very patient. I'm Daniel James Carter, 32 years old, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. Been cooped up in the city too long, so last fall, I figured I'd shake things up with a solo car camping trip. Me, my beat-up Subaru, and a craving for some peace. Headed out to Cumberland, Maryland, where the forests stretch out like they're hiding something. I'd heard the Savage River State Forest was rugged, quiet, perfect for a guy like me who's not big on fancy gear, but loves the wild. Packed some snacks, a sleeping bag, and my old guitar, thinking I'd strum away the nights. The drive up was smooth, just me and the hum of the engine, windows cracked to let in that crisp October air. I've always been the type to chase a little solitude. Grew up with 3 brothers, so quiet's a rare treat. Cumberland's this old coal town, nestled in the mountains, and the forest around it feels ancient, like it's got stories it ain't telling. Found a dirt pull-off about 5 miles past the ranger station. No one around, just how I like it. Parked under a canopy of red and gold leaves, the kind that make you think fall's putting on a show just for you. Setting up camp was easy. Popped the back hatch, tossed my sleeping bag in, and rigged a tarp over the rear for extra cover. I'm no pro, but I've done this enough to know what works. The air smelled like pine and damp earth, and I could hear the river gurgling somewhere close. Made me feel alive, you know? Like I'd escaped the grind for something real. I cracked a beer, leaned against the car, and watched the sun dip below the ridges. That's when I started feeling good, like this was my spot. Thing is, I wasn't totally alone. Met a couple locals on the way in, Jenny and Mark, mid-20s, all tattoos and flannel, at a gas station in town. They'd been friendly enough, asking where I was headed, warning me about bears. Stick to the main trails, Jenny said, flicking her lighter. Mark just grinned, like he knew something I didn't. I shrugged it off, figured they were just small-town types, maybe a little bored. Told them I'd be fine, I wasn't going far. They nodded, but their eyes lingered on me a bit too long. Night fell quick, and I crawled into the Subaru, guitar on my lap. Strummed a few chords, nothing fancy, just enough to fill the silence. The forest was dark as hell outside, the kind of dark that swallows your headlights whole. I'm not spooked easy. Grew up hunting with my dad, spent nights in worse places, but something about this spot felt off. Maybe it was the way the trees loomed, or how the river's sound seemed to shift, like it was whispering back. I shook it off, blamed it on being tired. I'd brought a book, some beat-up Stephen King paperback, figured it'd keep me company. Read a few pages by the light of my phone, sipping another beer. Horror's my thing. Love the thrill, the way it gets your heart pumping. Real life's usually tamer, right? That's what I thought anyway. Kept the windows cracked for air, the cold sneaking in, making me pull the sleeping bag tighter. It was cozy, almost perfect. Around midnight, I set the book down, eyes heavy. The forest was dead quiet now. No crickets, no wind, just this thick stillness that pressed against the car. I've slept in my Subaru plenty. Back seats fold flat. It's like a tiny metal cocoon. Felt safe enough. Locked the doors, more out of habit than anything, and let myself drift off. Dreams came fast, weird ones, all twisted trees and faces I couldn't place. Didn't think much of it then, but looking back, I should have paid attention to that stillness. It wasn't natural, not for a place like Savage River. Something was already watching, sizing me up, and I was too damn clueless to feel it. I'd find out soon enough, though, way sooner than I wanted. Last thing I remember before sleep took me was the faint smell of smoke, like someone had a fire going miles off. Figured it was nothing, just the wind carrying it in. Man, was I wrong. I wake up choking on that smoke smell, thick and acrid, like someone's burning trash nearby. It's pitch black outside, the kind of dark where you can't tell if your eyes are open or shut. I fumble for my phone. 3:17 a.m. glows back at me. My head's fuzzy from the beers, and the colds crept into the car, making my breath puff out in little clouds. I sit up, rubbing my face, trying to figure out if I dreamed the smell or if it's real. It's real, all right, sharp enough to sting my nose. Crawling to the front seat, I crack the driver's window wider and stick my head out. The forest is dead still, no breeze to carry that scent, but it's stronger now, mixed with something sour I can't place. Maybe a campfire gone wrong. I scan the trees, squinting into the dark, but there's nothing. No glow, no crackle. Just blackness stretching out forever. I'm not panicked yet, just annoyed, figured some idiot left a fire smoldering somewhere. I grab my flashlight, the cheap one from the glove box, and climb out. The gravel crunches under my boots, loud as gunshots in the silence. Shine the beam around, trees, rocks, the river glinting faintly 100 yards off. No smoke, no embers, nothing to explain it. That's when I notice the tarp over the back hatch is sagging, like something heavy brushed it down. I tug it back up, muttering to myself about wind I know damn well didn't blow. Uneasy's creeping in, but I shove it down, probably just a raccoon or something. Back in the car, I lock the doors again, telling myself I'm overreacting. Try to sleep, but my brain's buzzing now, replaying every horror flick I've ever seen. The smell fades a little, and I almost convince myself it's fine, until I hear it. A low hum, faint, like a truck idling miles away. Except there's no road that close. I hold my breath, listening hard. It's not steady, rises and falls, almost like breathing. I tell myself it's the river, playing tricks, but it's too rhythmic, too alive. Morning can't come fast enough. By 6 a.m., I'm up, bleary-eyed, brewing instant coffee on my little camp stove. The forest looks normal in daylight, birds chirping, mist curling off the river. The smoke's gone, and that hum? Nowhere to be heard. I laugh it off, feeling dumb for getting spooked. Decide to stretch my legs, hike a bit, shake off the weirdness, grab my water bottle and a granola bar, lock the car, and head down a trail marked with faded blazes. The hike's good at first. Crisp air, leaves crunching, the kind of stuff that makes you glad you ditched the city. But then I find it. A pile of bones, small ones, picked clean, stacked neat as you please in the middle of the path. Not scattered like an animal kill, arranged, deliberate. My stomach twists. Could be a hunter's leftovers, sure, but it's too precise, too creepy. I snap a pic with my phone, figuring I'll ask someone in town later. Back at the car, I'm rattled but trying to play it cool. That's when Jenny and Mark roll up in a dented pickup, tires spitting gravel. They're all smiles, asking how my night was. I mention the smoke, the bones, keeping it casual. Jenny's grin falters, just for a second, and Mark says, "Oh, yeah, weird stuff happens out here sometimes." They offer to hang out later, bring some firewood. I'm torn. Company sounds nice, but something about them feels off, like they're fishing for more than a chat. I say maybe, non-committal, and they drive off, promising to swing by at dusk. Now I'm stuck deciding, stay solo and risk whatever's lurking, or team up with folks who might be more trouble than they're worth. I lean against the Subaru, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at those woods. The bones keep nagging at me. Too clean, too perfect. By afternoon, I'm restless, pacing around the car. Dig out my guitar, strum a bit, but my fingers keep slipping. Nerves, I guess. The day's warm, sun high, but I can't shake this itch, like I'm being watched. Glance at the trees, half expecting eyes staring back. Nothing. Yet. Dusk creeps in, painting the forest in shades of gray, and I'm still strumming my guitar when Jenny and Mark's pickup rumbles back. They hop out, arms full of firewood, all chatty like we're old pals. I'm on edge, but I force a grin, don't want to look like a paranoid jerk. They build a fire quick, flames licking up into the dark, and for a bit, it's almost nice. The warmth cuts through the chill, and Mark cracks open a six-pack, tossing me one. We're laughing about dumb stuff, like how I nearly burned my eyebrows off cooking bacon once. Then Jenny pulls out this old Polaroid camera, starts snapping pics of the fire, the car, me. "Memories," she says, winking, but her eyes don't match the smile. Too sharp, too hungry. I brush it off, sip my beer, but my gut's tightening. Mark's quieter now, poking the fire with a stick, and I notice he's got this weird tattoo on his wrist, some kind of jagged symbol, like a kid scratched it in with a knife. I ask about it, casual-like, and he just grunts, family thing. The fire's popping, throwing shadows everywhere, and that's when I hear it again, that hum from last night, louder now, pulsing through the trees. Jenny cocks her head, like she hears it too, but Mark doesn't flinch. I ask if they hear anything weird, and Jenny laughs, too quick, saying it's just the wind. There's no wind, though, the air's still as death. My skin's crawling, and I'm starting to think these two know more than they're letting on. They start telling stories, local legends, they say. Jenny's voice drops low, talking about folks who've gone missing in Savage River, how some say it's the land itself, swallowing people whole. Mark chimes in, all serious, about old ways still alive out here, rituals no one talks about. I laugh it off, horror fan or not. I'm not buying campfire ghost tales. But then Ginny pulls a photo from her pocket, an old one, grainy, showing 3 people by a car like mine. Found this last year, she says. They never came back. I take the pic, hands shaky, and squint at it. The car is a Subaru, same color as mine, and the people, 2 guys, 1 girl, look way too familiar. My throat goes dry. Where'd you get this? I ask, voice cracking. Mark smirks, says, around, and that's when I see it. Movement in the trees, just beyond the firelight. Not a deer, not a bear, something upright, slow, deliberate. I blink, and it's gone, but my heart's hammering now. Guys, did you see that? I'm up, flashlight in hand, swinging the beam wild. Ginny grabs my arm, hard, saying, sit down, Dan. You're freaking out over nothing. But her grip's like iron, and Mark's watching me, eyes glinting like he's waiting for something. The hum's a roar now, vibrating in my chest, and I swear I smell that smoke again, sour and thick. I yank free, stumble back toward the car, and that's when the fire flares, way too high, unnatural, spitting sparks like it's alive. I spin around, and there it is, tall, thin, hunched, stepping out of the trees. No face, just a blank stretch of skin where one should be, arms too long, fingers twitching like they're tasting the air. My brain locks up. Horror's one thing in a book, but this is real, and it's wrong. Ginny's yelling something, Mark's laughing, and I'm frozen, staring at that thing as it tilts its head, like it's studying me. The flashlight drops from my hand, beam spinning crazy across the ground, and I bolt for the car. Keys. Where the hell are my keys? I'm patting pockets, cursing, when I hear Ginny behind me, voice cold. You shouldn't have come here, Dan. I turn, and she's holding that Polaroid, but now it's me in the picture, me by the fire, alone, no sign of them. My stomach drops, and the thing in the trees takes another step closer. I find the keys, finally, jammed in my jacket, and dive into the driver's seat. The engine sputters. Come on, you piece of junk, and that faceless thing's moving faster now, gliding like it's not even touching the ground. Mark's still by the fire, chanting something I can't make out, and Ginny's just standing there, smiling like she's won. The Subaru coughs to life just as that faceless thing lunges, fingers scraping the back hatch with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. I slam the gas, tires spinning gravel, and peel out onto the dirt road, heart jackhammering so hard I can barely breathe. The rear view mirror's a nightmare. That thing's chasing me, loping on those 2 long legs, keeping pace like it's toying with me. Ginny and Mark are dots by the fire now, but I swear I hear her laugh echoing through the trees. I'm flying blind, headlights bouncing off pines, the road more ruts than path. The hum's everywhere, rattling my skull, and I'm gripping the wheel like it's the only thing keeping me sane. That smell, smoke, and rot floods the car, even with the windows up. I glance back, and it's closer, blank face catching the taillights, arms stretching like it's reaching through the glass. I swerve, damn near clip a tree, and scream at myself to focus. Get out, just get out. The ranger station's my only shot, 5 miles back, maybe less if I don't crash first. I'm pushing the Subaru past its limits, engine whining, and I'm muttering prayers I haven't said since I was a kid. Then the road dips, sharp, and I hit a pothole. Bang. Front tire blows, steering goes to hell. I wrestle the wheel, skid sideways, and slam into a ditch, airbags popping like a gunshot. My nose is bleeding, head spinning, but I'm alive. For now. I kick the door open, stumble out, and that thing's right there, 10 feet away, head tilted, fingers flexing. No time to think. I grab the tire iron from the back, hands slick with sweat, and swing wild. It dodges, fast as a snake, and I'm running, legs burning, into the woods. Branches claw my face, roots trip me up, but I don't stop. The hum's a shriek now, and I feel it behind me, close enough to smell that sour decay on its skin, or whatever it's got. I hit the river, ice cold and fast, wading it up to my thighs. It's slowing me down, but maybe it'll slow that thing too. I risk a look back. Nothing, just dark water and trees. My chest heaving, hope flickering, when the current yanks me under. I thrash, swallow a mouthful of muck, and claw my way to the bank, coughing, shivering, tire iron still clutched like a lifeline. The hum's gone quiet, and I think, maybe, I lost it. Staggering through the mud, I spot a light, dim, flickering, up ahead. Ranger station? I limp toward it, soaked and freezing, every step a fight. The light's closer now, and I see it's not the station. It's a cabin, old, half-rotted, windows black. My gut screams trap, but I'm out of options. I bang on the door, yelling for help, voice raw. No answer, but it creaks open, unlocked. I stumble in, lock it behind me, and collapse against the wall, panting. Inside's a mess. Dusty furniture, newspapers from the 90s, a stale smell like nobody's lived here in years. I find a kitchen knife on the counter, dull but better than nothing, and peek out a cracked window. The floor is still, too still, and I'm shaking so bad the knife's rattling in my hand. Then I see it, across the clearing, that thing, standing dead center, staring right at me with that empty face. My knees buckle, but I'm not done yet. I barricade the door with a chair, grab a lantern from a shelf, and flick it on. Weak light, but it's something. There's a cellar hatch in the floor, rusted shut. I pry it open with the tire iron, desperation fueling me, and drop down into the dark. It's damp, smells like mold, but it's a hideout. I huddle there, lantern dimming, listening for any sound. My phone's dead, soaked from the river, and I'm alone, waiting, praying it doesn't find me. The cellar's a tomb, cold, tight, with cobwebs brushing my face every time I shift. I'm crouched by the ladder, knife in one hand, tire iron in the other, ears straining. Hours pass, maybe, or minutes. Time's a blur down here. The lantern's flickering out, and I'm fighting to keep my eyes open, adrenaline crashing hard. That hums back, faint, seeping through the floorboards like a heartbeat. I tell myself it's in my head, but I know better. Footsteps thud above, slow, heavy, not human. The chair I wedged against the door scrapes, then crashes, and my stomach lurches. I grip the knife tighter, whispering, "Not like this, not like this." The hatch creaks, just an inch, and I see it. Those long fingers curling around the edge, peeling it up like it's nothing. I lunge, stab upward, blades sinking into something soft. It recoils, silent, no scream, just that blank face looming as the hatch slams shut again. I'm shaking, blood on my hands. Not mine, I think, and I shove the tire iron against the hatch, wedging it tight. It holds, for now. I back into the corner, lantern dead, pitch black swallowing me. My mind's racing. Jenny, Mark, that Polaroid. They set me up, didn't they? Some sick game, some ritual, and I'm the damn bait. I should have stayed in Richmond, should have ignored that itch to get away. The hum stops, sudden, and the silence is worse. I wait, barely breathing, until I hear voices. Jenny's, sharp and pissed. Mark's, low and calm. They're upstairs, arguing. "He's gone," she snaps. "No, he's here," Mark says, and I know I'm screwed. The hatch rattles, hard, and I'm scrambling, looking for anything, a weapon, an exit. There's a loose brick in the wall, and I yank it free, clawing at the dirt behind it, hoping for a way out. Dirt caves in, and I dig faster, nails splitting, until I hit air, outside air. I squeeze through, a tight fit, scraping my sides raw, and tumble into the woods. Dawn's breaking, gray light filtering through, and I'm running again, lungs burning. I hear them behind me, crashing through brush, and that thing. It's there too, a shadow gliding parallel. I trip, face plant into leaves, and Jenny's on me, pinning me down, knife at my throat. "You should have stayed put," she hisses, and I thrash, knee her hard, roll free. Mark's shouting, the faceless thing closing in, and I'm up, sprinting blind. I spot the river again, dive in, let it carry me downstream. Current's brutal, smashing me against rocks, but I don't care, better than them. I wash up miles down, battered, half drowned, and crawl onto the bank, coughing blood. I stumble to a road, flag down a trucker, barely coherent. He gets me to Cumberland, hospital, cops. I tell them everything. Car, bones, Jenny, Mark, that thing. They find my Subaru, trashed, but no sign of anyone else. Cops think I'm nuts, say it's trauma, but I know what I saw. Weeks later, I'm back in Richmond, jumping at shadows, sleeping with the lights on. Last night, I found it under my door. A Polaroid, me by the river, soaked and wild-eyed, snapped from behind. No note, just that picture, and I swear I smelled smoke when I picked it up. They're not done with me. I should have never gone to Maryland. I'm Abigail Marie Foster, 28 years old, and I live in Baltimore, Maryland. City life's been grinding me down. Traffic, noise, the whole mess. So I decided to ditch it for a weekend and go car camping out near Cumberland. Got this old Jeep Cherokee I've been meaning to test out. Figured I'd turn it into my little rolling fortress for a couple nights. Packed it with a cooler, some blankets, a sketchbook. Yeah, I draw when I'm stressed. And hit the road, chasing that sweet smell of pine and freedom. The drive out's a haul, about 3 hours, but I'm buzzing with that antsy excitement you get when you're breaking routine. Cumberland's tucked up in the Allegheny Mountains, all rolling hills and coal town grit. I'd read about the Green Ridge State Forest online. Tons of space, dirt roads perfect for my Jeep, and hardly a soul around. Pulled off I-68, found a bumpy track leading into the trees, and set up shop by a little creek, maybe a mile from anything resembling civilization. Popping the tailgate, I spread out my blankets in the back, rigged a mosquito net over the open hatch. Learned that trick the hard way last summer. The creek's babbling away, soft and steady, and I'm feeling pretty smug about picking this spot. No fancy tent, just me and the Jeep, like some badass pioneer. I'm not big on roughing it too hard. Brought a portable charger, some tunes on my phone, but I love the idea of disappearing into the wild for a bit. Met a guy at a gas station in town earlier. Paul, early 40s, scruffy beard, works the counter. He saw my gear, asked where I was headed, told him Green Ridge, and he got this look, like he was chewing on something he didn't want to say. "Watch yourself out there," he muttered, ringing up my coffee. "Folks get lost easy." I laughed, said I had GPS, no worries. He just nodded, handed me my change, and watched me leave like I was already a ghost. First night's perfect, sunsets all orange and pink, bleeding through the trees. I sketch it quick, smudging charcoal with my fingers, feeling artsy and alive. Cook some ramen on a tiny stove, sip a cider from the cooler, and lean back against the Jeep, watching fireflies blink on. Baltimore feels a million miles away, and I'm loving it. Quiet's a drug I didn't know I needed. Even the creek song feels like it's just for me. I crawl into the back around 10 p.m., lock the doors, and settle in. Jeep's cozy, seats folded flat, blankets piled up, and I've got my sketchbook open, doodling by flashlight. Used to draw creepy stuff as a kid, monsters, twisted faces, so I start sketching something like that, all jagged teeth and hollow eyes. Laugh to myself, thinking it's funny how horror sticks with you. The forest's humming outside, alive but peaceful, and I'm drifting off, pencil still in hand. Sleep hits fast, and I dream weird, swirling water, hands reaching up from the creek, charcoal smearing across my face. Wake up once, groggy, to adjust the blankets, and notice the creak's louder, like it's right outside the Jeep. Figure it's just my head playing tricks. Happens when you're half asleep. Roll over, pull the blanket tight, and let the dark take me again. Next morning, I'm up with the sun, feeling good. Coffee's brewing, birds are chirping, and I'm sketching the creek now, all lazy curves and shimmering light. It's deeper than I thought, fast too, cutting through the rocks like it's got somewhere to be. I'm in my zone, happy, thinking this trip's exactly what I needed. Then I see it. My sketchbook, left open overnight, has a new drawing. Not mine. A rough, shaky outline of me, asleep in the Jeep, scratched in with something dark and wet. My stomach flips, and I'm staring at it, wondering how the hell it got there. I'm crouched by the Jeep, staring at that sketch, my coffee going cold in my hand. It's me, no question, curled up in the back, head on my arm, blankets tangled. The lines are sloppy, smeared, like someone used their finger dipped in mud, or worse. My heart's thumping, and I'm flipping through the sketchbook, checking every page. Nothing else is touched, just that one, right after my monster doodle from last night. I slam it shut, toss it in the Jeep, and try to breathe. Maybe I did it in my sleep? Nah, I'd remember. Wouldn't I? I pace around the campsite, scanning the ground for tracks. Nothing but my own boot prints in the dirt. The creek's still rushing, loud enough to drown out the birds now, and I'm kicking myself for not locking the tailgate tighter. Could have been a prank, sure, but who? Paul from the gas station pops in my head, his weird warning, but he didn't know exactly where I'd be. I grab my phone, Check the signal, 1 bar, flickering. Text my sister in Baltimore. All good, just sketching, but it won't send. Great. Decide to shake it off, pack up my art stuff, and hike down the creek a bit. Fresh air might clear my head. I'm not running scared over some creepy drawing. Not yet. Grab a water bottle, lock the Jeep, and start walking, the sketchbook nagging at me from the back of my mind. The forest's thick here, all mossy rocks and tangled roots, and I'm dodging puddles, trying to focus on the scenery. It's pretty, sure, but that disturbing itch won't quit. About a half-mile in, I spot something. Fabric, snagged on a bush, flapping in the breeze. It's a scrap of flannel, red and black, torn jagged. I pluck it off, turn it over in my hands. Fresh, not weathered. Someone's been here, recent. My brain's spinning. Lost hiker? Hunter? I stuff it in my pocket, figuring I'll ask in town later, and keep going. The creek's wider now, churning over rocks, and I'm sketching it in my head, trying to stay calm. Then I hear it, a splash, loud, like something big hit the water upstream. I freeze, peering through the trees. Nothing moves, just the current, but my skin's prickling. Hello. I call out, voice cracking a little. No answer, just the creek roaring back. I'm not dumb enough to chase it down. Horror movies taught me that much, but I'm rattled, hustling back to the Jeep faster than I'd admit. That splash wasn't a fish, not with that weight. Back at camp, I'm fidgety, double-checking the locks, sipping water like it's gonna fix me. Decide to drive into Cumberland, get some signal, maybe ask about that flannel. Jeep starts fine, and I'm bouncing down the dirt road, radio static hissing, cause there's no stations out here. Pull into town, park by a diner, and finally get bars. Text goes through, plus a few worried ones from my sister. I'm typing back when Paul walks by, same scruffy beard, carrying a bag of groceries. Hey Paul, I say, casual but not really. Show him the flannel scrap. Ask if he's seen anyone wearing it. His face tightens, just for a second, and he says, folks lose stuff out there all the time. Don't worry about it. But he's not meeting my eyes, and I'm not buying it. Press him a little, mention the splash, the sketch, and he cuts me off, sharp. Stay by the road next time, Abigail. Safer. Then he's gone, ducking into his truck. I head into the diner, order a burger, and sit by the window, sketching the street to settle my nerves. Locals are chatty, but I catch a few glances, too long, too curious. One old guy, all wrinkles and tobacco stains, leans over and says, "You're the Jeep girl, huh? Green Ridge ain't for city folks." I laugh, play it off, but he doesn't smile back. My burger comes, and I'm wolfing it down, debating, stay another night, prove I'm not spooked, or pack up and bail. Driving back, sun's dipping low, and I'm leaning towards staying, stubborn streak kicking in. Pull up to my spot, and the creek's louder than ever, like it's pissed. Step out, and there's a new sketch on my windshield, tucked under the wiper. Me at the diner, mid-bite, penciled and rough. My knees go weak, and I'm spinning around, looking for whoever's screwing with me. The forest's watching, I swear it is. I'm standing by the Jeep, that diner sketch trembling in my hand, and the creek's roaring like it's mocking me. The drawing's rough. Me, hunched over my burger, scribbled in pencil, but it's the details that gut me. My jacket's zipper half down, the ketchup smear on my sleeve. Someone was there, watching, close enough to see that. I crumple it, toss it in the Jeep, and spin around, yelling, "Who's out there?" Nothing but trees, and that damn water answer back. My chest's tight, and I'm kicking myself for coming back. I grab a stick, pathetic, I know, and start circling the campsite, eyes darting. The forest's too quiet now, no birds, no rustling, just the creek pounding away. Check the Jeep. Locked, nothing touched, but then I see it. Muddy streaks on the tailgate, smudged like hands dragged across it. Not mine. I've been careful, boots dry from town. My throat's closing up, and I'm muttering. This isn't funny, like that'll fix it. It doesn't. Back inside, I lock everything, windows up, and sit in the driver's seat, stick across my lap. Sun's gone, dark's swallowing the woods, and I'm trying to think straight. Could be Paul, messing with me, small-town jerk with a grudge, but those sketches? Too personal, too fast. I dig out my phone, still got a bar from town, and call my sister. It rings, then cuts to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Something's weird out here. Call me back." I say, voice shaky. Signal drops right after dead. I'm flipping through the sketchbook again, and there's another new one. Me by the creek this morning, holding that flannel scrap, water dripping off my boots. It's wet, smudged with something dark, and I drop it like it's burning. My hands are shaking, and I'm piecing it together. Someone's been here, in my Jeep, while I was in town. I check the back. Blankets messed up, cooler tipped over, cider cans rolling loose. Panic's clawing at me, and I'm thinking I should have listened to Paul, bailed when I had the chance. Then the headlights catch it. Across the creek, a figure, stock still, staring. Tall, hunched, draped in something ragged, face hidden in shadow. My breath stops, and I flick the high beams. Nothing, just trees. Blink, and it's back, closer, maybe 50 feet off, head tilted like it's curious. I scream, slam the horn, and it doesn't flinch, just steps sideways, slow, into the dark. My skin's crawling, and I'm fumbling for the keys, hands slick with sweat. Engine growls awake, and I'm peeling out, dirt flying, not caring where I'm going, just away. The figure's gone, but I feel it, that weight, like eyes boring into me. Hit a main road, pavement at last, and I'm gunning it toward Cumberland, glancing back every second. Rear view's empty, but my gut's screaming it's not over. Then the radio crackles, static, then a voice, low and garbled, saying my name, Abigail. I smack it off, hard in my throat, and keep driving. Lights of town flicker ahead, and I'm shaking so bad I nearly miss the turn. Pull into a gas station lot, tires squealing, and sit there, panting, doors locked. Clerk inside. Paul again, sees me, steps out. You okay? He calls, but I'm not answering, just watching the woods beyond the pumps. He bangs on the window, and I crack it, croaking, something's out there. He frowns, looks past me, and goes pale, paler than I've ever seen a guy like him go. He says, "Get inside, now." And I stumble out, legs jelly, following him into the station. He locks the door, flips the sign to closed, and grabs a shotgun from under the counter. "What did you see?" he asks, voice hard. I tell him. Figure, sketches, the radio, and he curses, low and rough. "Shouldn't have stayed," he mutters, peering out the window. I'm about to snap at him when the lights flicker, just once, and something thumps the roof, heavy and slow. We both freeze, staring up, and the thump comes again, deliberate, like it's testing us. Paul pumps the shotgun, hands steady, and whispers, "It's been a while since it came this close." I'm gaping at him, realizing he knows exactly what's out there, and it's way worse than some prank. The air's thick, disturbing, and I'm gripping the counter, waiting for whatever's next. The thumping stops, and the silence is worse, thick, pressing down like a hand over my mouth. Paul's got the shotgun aimed at the ceiling, sweat beading on his forehead, and I'm clutching the counter, nails digging into wood. "What the hell is it?" I hiss, but he just shakes his head, eyes locked on the door. The lights flicker again, then die, pitch black, just the glow of the pumps outside cutting through. My heart's a jackhammer, and I'm straining to hear anything over my own ragged breathing. Paul grabs my arm, yanks me toward the back. "Storeroom, go," he snaps, shoving me through a door. I stumble in, tripping over boxes, and he slams it shut behind us, wedging a broomstick through the handle. It's cramped, shelves of canned goods, a flickering emergency light, and I'm panting, asking, "You've seen it before, haven't you?" He nods, grim. "Years ago. Took my brother. Never stops hunting once it picks you." My stomach drops. Those sketches, it's been on me since I got here. Something slams the front door, hard, glass cracking, and I yelp, clapping a hand over my mouth. Paul's whispering, "Quiet, damn it," and I'm nodding, tears stinging my eyes. The thing's moving, slow thuds circling the station, and I'm picturing it, ragged, hunched, sniffing me out. Paul points to a rusty hatch in the floor. "Old delivery chute, leads outside. Only shot we've got." I'm shaking my head. No way, but he's already prying it open, metal screeching. He shoves me down first, and I slide, hitting gravel outside with a grunt. Air's cold, reeks of gas, and I'm scrambling up as Paul drops behind me, shotgun clattering. The Jeep's 20 feet away, and we're sprinting, my legs screaming. I hear it, crunching glass, a low rasp, and glance back. It's there, climbing out a shattered window, limbs bending wrong, head swiveling toward us. I scream, dive for the driver's door, keys slipping in my sweaty hands. Engine roars, and Paul's in the passenger seat, yelling, "Go, go!" I floor it, tires spinning, and we're peeling out, the thing lurching after us. It's fast, too fast, matching pace in the rear view, a blur of rags and bone. I swerve onto the highway, pushing the Jeep to its limit, engine whining like it's gonna blow. Paul's loading shells, muttering, "Head for the bridge, water might slow it." I don't ask, just drive, praying he's right. Headlights catch the creek bridge ahead. Narrow, wooden, rickety as hell. I gun it, boards rattling under us, and Paul leans out, fires, boom, shotgun blast lighting up the night. The thing staggers, but keeps coming, leaping onto the bridge behind us. I'm screaming, "Hold on," and yank the wheel, skidding off the far end. We hit dirt, bounce hard, and I hear it, with snapping a splash. Glance back, it's in the water, thrashing, sinking fast. I don't stop, not till we're miles out. Pulling into a truck stop, shaking so bad I can't shift gears. Paul's breathing hard, says, "River'll hold it, maybe." I'm sobbing, wiping snot on my sleeve, and he hands me a rag, all gruff like it's no big deal. We sit there, Jeep idling, watching the dark. My phone's buzzing, "Sister," finally, but I can't answer, hands too shaky. Paul's quiet, staring out, and I'm thinking we made it, we're safe. Then the radio crackles, static, then my voice, looped, "Something's weird out here." I smack it off, heart sinking. Paul curses, grabs the shotgun, and I'm looking around, frantic. Nothing yet, but the air's wrong, heavy, sour. I lock the doors, gripping the wheel, and Paul says, "Drive. Don't stop till daylight." I nod, pull out, and we're rolling again, running on fumes and fear. We're hauling ass down I-68, sky graying with dawn, and I'm white-knuckling it, eyes flicking to every shadow. Paul slumped beside me, shotgun across his lap, muttering about old debts and marked ones. I'm half listening, mind spinning. Those sketches, the flannel, his brother. What does it want? I ask, voice hoarse. He shrugs, bitter. Us. Always us. I'm too tired to argue. Just keep driving, aiming for Baltimore, home, anything safe. Gas lights blinking, we're running dry, and I pull into a rest stop, hands trembling as I pump fuel. Paul's out, pacing, scanning the trees. Dawn's breaking, pink streaking the sky, and I'm daring to hope. Maybe daylight's our shield. I'm capping the tank when he yells, "Abigail, move." I spin. It's there, crawling from the ditch, wet and ragged, head lolling like it's sniffing me out. My scream's stuck, and I'm bolting for the Jeep. Paul fires. Boom, boom. Pellets shredding its side, but it barrels forward, slamming him against the pump. He goes down, hard, blood pooling, and I'm frozen, keys dangling. It turns, locks on me, and I snap out of it, diving into the Jeep. Engine sputters. Come on. And I'm peeling out, Paul's groans fading behind me. I'm sobbing. I'm sorry, but I don't stop, can't stop. Rear view shows it crouched over him, tearing, and I gag, swerving onto the highway. I drive blind, tears blurring everything, till the Jeep coughs and dies, out of gas, miles from anywhere. I'm stranded, sun up but weak, and I lock the doors, curling up in the back. Phone's dead, radio's silent, and I'm alone, waiting. Hours crawl by, hunger, cold, terror gnawing at me. I sketch to cope, shaky lines of Paul's face, that thing, but the pencil snaps, and I'm crying again, useless. Cops find me at dusk, banging on the window. I'm a mess, wild-eyed, babbling about Paul, the creature. They take me in, gentle but skeptical, and I hear them radio about a body at the rest stop, torn up, unrecognizable. Bear attack, one says, but I know better. Back in Baltimore, I'm crashing at my sister's, lights on all night, jumping at every creek. She thinks I'm traumatized, pushes therapy, but I can't talk. Words don't fit this. Weeks later, I'm unpacking, find my sketchbook in the Jeep's glove box. Cops must have grabbed it. Flip it open, and my breath stops. A new drawing. Me in the Jeep, curled up, dated today, ink still wet. I drop it, scramble back, and smell it. Sour, damp, like the creek. Something thumps upstairs, slow, deliberate, and I'm grabbing a knife. Knowing I screwed up, I ran, but I didn't escape. I should have stayed with Paul, fought it together. My mistake was thinking I could outrun it. That daylight mattered. Now it's here, in my city, my home, and I'm the last one left. I lock myself in the bathroom, knife shaking, listening as the thumps get closer, louder. The door creaks, and I'm whispering, not yet, but it's too late. I hear my name, rasped low, and the lights go out. I'm Lucas Henry Brooks, 35 years old, and I live in Annapolis, Maryland. Been itching to get out of the hustle lately. Too many boats, too many tourists, so I figured a car camping trip would fix me right up. Got my trusty old Ford Escape, nothing fancy, but it's got room in the back for me to crash. Packed a fishing rod, some beef jerky, a cooler of beer, and pointed it toward Cumberland, up in the mountains where the air is sharp and the quiet's deep. Green Ridge State Forest was the plan. Heard it's got creeks full of trout and enough space to breathe. The drive's a solid 2 hours, winding through hills that turn gold this time of year. October's my season. Annapolis is all water and noise, but out here, it's earth and stillness, the kind that sinks into your bones. I pull off a gravel road about 10 miles past town, find a spot near 15 Mile Creek, and park under some oak shedding leaves like confetti. Pop the tailgate, toss in a sleeping pad, and I'm set. Home on wheels, just me and the wild. First thing I do is crack a beer and lean against the Escape, watching the creek sparkle in the late sun. I've always been a water guy, grew up casting lines with my dad, but this feels different, primal almost. The forest hums around me, alive with little rustles, and I'm grinning like a kid. No phone signal out here, which is perfect. Left it on airplane mode anyway. Just me, the rod, and a chance to unplug from the world. Ran into a woman at a Cumberland diner on the way in. Ellen, maybe 50, gray streaks in her hair, waiting tables. She saw my fishing gear, asked where I was headed, told her Green Ridge, and she got quiet, wiping the counter a little too hard. Careful by the water, she said, voice low. Currents pull funny out there. I shrugged, said I'd fished worse, tipped her extra, and left. Figured she was just being folksy. Small towns love their warnings. I spend the afternoon casting into the creek, pulling up a couple small trout. Nothing to brag about, but enough for dinner. Gut him quick, cook him over a fire I build by the Escape, and damn, it's good. Crisp skin, smoky flavor, washed down with another beer. Sun's dipping low, painting the trees red, and I'm feeling like a king out here, master of my little patch of nowhere. The creek's gurgling, steady, like it's singing me to sleep. Night falls fast, and I climb into the back, lock the doors out of habit. City instincts die hard. Got a lantern rigged up, soft glow, and I'm flipping through an old field and stream mag I brought along. The forest settles outside, just the creek and a few crickets keeping me company. It's cozy, the Escape rocking a bit when I shift, and I'm thinking this is what life's supposed to be. No deadlines, no bullshit, just this. Sleep's creeping in when I hear it, a splash, sharp, upstream. Sit up, listen hard. Could be a deer, a fish jumping, but it's too heavy, too deliberate. I flick off the lantern, peek out the window, and see nothing but dark water glinting. Chill, Lucas, I mutter, lying back down. Probably nothing, right? Creek's loud tonight, though, louder than it should be, like it's restless. I shake it off, close my eyes, and let it fade. Dreams hit weird, water closing over my head, fish hooks snagging my skin, Ellen's voice saying, funny currents. Wake up sweaty, check my phone. 2 a.m., no bars. The creek's still going, insistent, and I'm half tempted to look again, but I don't. Pull the blanket tighter, tell myself it's just the woods doing its thing. I've fished plenty, nothing spooks me out here. Morning's gray, mist curling off the water, and I'm up early, brewing coffee on my stove. The trout taste lingers, and I'm planning another cast, gonna bag a big one today. Step to the creek, rod in hand, and freeze. There's a line in the mud, deep, dragged, like something heavy slid into the water overnight. My gut twists, but I laugh it off. Probably a log, a beaver, something normal. Still, I'm keeping one eye on that creek now. I'm standing by the creek, coffee mug steaming in my hand, staring at that drag mark in the mud. It's wide, maybe 2 feet, and runs straight from the bank into the water, disappearing under the surface. My brain's spinning. Beaver, sure, or a big turtle. but it's too clean. No claw marks, no mess. I sip my coffee, bitter and hot, and try to shake the creepy feeling crawling up my neck. "You're fine, Lucas," I mutter, kicking a rock into the water. Splash echoes, and I'm back to fishing, gonna ignore it. Set up my rod, cast a line, and settle on a flat rock, watching the current tug the bait. It's peaceful, mist burning off slow, but I'm jumpy. Keep glancing at that mark. Half an hour in, I snag something. Line goes taut, rod bending hard. I'm grinning, reeling it in, thinking big trout, maybe bass. Then it stops, dead weight, and I yank harder. Up comes a boot, old, waterlogged, laces shredded. My stomach flips, and I drop it fast, watching it sink back down. I'm rattled now, pacing the bank, telling myself it's just trash. Hikers lose stuff all the time. But that boot's heavy in my head, and I'm wondering who wore it, how it got there. Decide to hike upstream a bit, clear my mind, see if the creek's hiding anything else. Grab my rod, a water bottle, lock the escape, and start walking. The forest's thick, branches snapping under my boots, and the creek's louder up here, rushing over rocks like it's in a hurry. About a mile in, I find it, a tackle box, rusted shut, half buried in the mud. Pry it open with a stick, and inside's a mess. Hooks, lures, a soggy photo of a guy, 30s, maybe, smiling with a fish. My hands shake a little as I pocket the photo, gonna ask in town later. The creek's churning beside me, and I'm thinking about Ellen's warning, those funny currents. Maybe she wasn't just talking water. I'm spooked, but I'm not packing up yet. Stubborn as hell, that's me. Back at the escape, I'm restless, frying up some jerky for lunch, grease popping in the pan. The boot and the tackle box are nagging at me, and I'm debating, stay another night, fish some more, or drive into Cumberland, dig for answers. Sun's high, warming the air, and I'm leaning towards staying. Don't want to let a little weirdness chase me off. Crack a beer, sit by the creek, and watch the water, trying to relax. It's not working. Then I hear it, a low gurgle, not the creek's usual song, coming from downstream. I stand, squinting through the trees, and see bubbles rising, big ones, like something's exhaling under there. Fish, I tell myself, but my pulse is up, and I'm grabbing my rod like it's a weapon. The bubbles stop, water goes still, and I'm holding my breath, waiting. Nothing. I laugh, loud and shaky, getting jumpy over nothing. Lucas, chill out. Afternoon drags, and I'm casting again, but my heart's not in it. Keep catching junk, twigs, a sock, crap that's got no business in a creek this clean. Sun's dipping, shadows stretching, and I'm frying the last trout when headlights bounce down the road. A truck pulls up, beat up Chevy, 2 guys inside. They hop out, friendly enough, Jake and Tom, locals, mid-20s, hauling firewood. Saw your smoke, Jake says, grinning. Mine company? I'm torn, alone's nice, but extra eyes might settle me. They set up a fire, crack beers, and we're swapping fish stories. Tom's quiet, watching the creek, and Jake's loud, laughing about haunted hollers around here. I mention the boot, casual-like, and Tom's head snaps up. "Where'd you pull that?" he asks, too sharp. I point downstream, and he trades a look with Jake, quick, tense. "Folks lose stuff," Jake says, brushing it off, but Tom's not smiling anymore. They offer to stay till dark, and I say sure, figuring safety in numbers. Fire's crackling, night's full on, and I'm feeling better, until the creek goes quiet. Dead quiet, no gurgle, no ripple. Jake stops mid-sentence, and Tom's on his feet, staring at the water. "That ain't right," he whispers, and I'm up too, that disturbing itch back full force. Something's off, way off, and I'm wishing I'd driven out when I had the chance. The creek's silence hits like a punch, and I'm standing by the fire, beer can crumpling in my fist. Jake's frozen mid-laugh, Tom's eyes are glued to the water, and the air's thick, heavy, like it's holding its breath. "What the hell's that mean?" I ask, voice cracking, but Tom just shakes his head, slow, like he's scared to speak. The fire's popping, throwing shadows, and I'm straining to hear anything. Wind, bugs, something normal. Nothing. Just this dead, creepy stillness that's all wrong. Jake finally moves, grabs a stick, and pokes the fire, muttering. Happens sometimes. Water plays tricks. But his hands are shaky, and Tom's backing away from the creek, whispering, "We should go." I'm about to argue. My camp, my call, when the water ripples. Not a splash, not a fish, just a slow, oily wave rolling upstream against the current. My gut twists, and I'm stepping back too, bumping into the escape. Then it rises, something dark, slick, breaking the surface. Not a head, not a body, just a mass, glistening, with tendrils or arms or God knows what curling out, dripping. It's big, too big for that shallow creek, and it's turning like it's looking at us. Tom bolts for the truck, yelling, "Lucas, move." Jake's swearing, kicking dirt on the fire, and I'm stuck, staring, heart hammering. It's not a bear, not a damn fish. It's horror straight out of a nightmare, and it's real. I snap out of it, lunge for the escape, keys jingling in my pocket. The thing's shifting, tendrils stretching toward the bank, and I hear this sound. Wet, guttural, like a drain unclogging. Tom's truck roars to life, headlights slashing the dark, and he's screaming, "Get in." I'm torn. My car, my stuff. But Jake's shoving me toward the truck, saying, "No time, man." I dive in, slamming the door, and Tom floors it, gravel spraying. We're bouncing down the road, and I'm twisted around, watching that thing slither onto the bank, slow, deliberate, tendrils dragging my cooler into the creek. The escape's still there, tailgate open, and I'm cursing myself for leaving it. Jake's panting, "Told you." Haunted hollers, but Tom's white-knuckled, muttering, "It's not a story, dumbass." I ask what it is, voice high, and Tom snaps, "Old. Hungry. Been here longer than us." My skin's crawling. Ellen's warning, the boot, it's all clicking. The truck hits pavement, and we're speeding toward Cumberland, trees blurring past. I'm thinking we're clear, until the headlights catch it. Ahead, blocking the road, that mass again, bigger, tendrils splayed like a net. Tom swerves, tires screeching, and we slam into a ditch, metal crunching. My head smacks the dash, blood's in my mouth, and Jake's groaning, pinned by the seat. Tom's kicking his door open, yelling, "Run." I stumble out, legs wobbly, and see it, closer, tendrils whipping, dragging itself toward us. Jake's stuck, screaming for help, and I'm yanking at his arm, but he's wedged tight. Tom's pulling me back, saying, "He's gone. Lucas, go." I'm fighting him, tears burning, but the thing's on us, a tendril snaking around Jake's leg. He shrieks, "Hi." Awful, and it yanks him free, dragging him into the dark. I'm running, Tom ahead, and that sound, wet, tearing, chases me. We hit the woods, branches slashing my face, and I'm gasping, tasting blood. Tom's fast, leading us toward town, but I hear it behind, slithering, relentless. My fishing trip's a distant joke now. This is survival, raw and terrifying. We break onto a side road, lights of Cumberland flickering ahead, and I'm praying we make it. Tom's ahead, shouting, "Keep going," and I'm stumbling after, lungs burning, every step a fight. The road's rough, gravel biting my boots, and that slithering's closer, a wet rasp that's pure horror. I risk a look back, tendrils glinting in the moonlight, pulling that mass along, fast as hell. My mind screaming, "Jake, the truck, my escape," but I shove it down, focus on running. Town's close, lights brighter, and I'm clinging to that like a lifeline. We hit a gas station lot, same one I stopped at coming in, and Tom bolts inside, banging on the locked door. I'm behind, panting, when the clerk, Ellen, from the diner, opens up, wide-eyed. "What's?" she starts, but Tom cuts her off. "It's out there, let us in." She pulls us inside, slams the door, and locks it, hands trembling. I'm doubled over, coughing, and she's staring at me, recognition hitting. "You didn't listen," she says, voice flat. Something smacks the glass, hard, and I jump, spinning around. It's there, pressed against the window, tendrils spreading, smearing dark streaks. Ellen grabs a bat from under the counter, and Tom's yelling, "Back door now." We're scrambling through the store, past shelves of chips and sodas, and I hear glass shatter behind us. Loud, final. My stomach's in knots, and I'm thinking this is it. We're done. We burst out the back, into an alley, and Tom's leading, weaving through dumpsters and shadows. The slithering's fainter, but it's still coming. Relentless, like it's tasting the air for us. Ellen's muttering, "Should have warned you harder," and I snap, "What is it?" She doesn't answer, just points to a pickup parked ahead. Hers, I guess. We pile in, me in the back, Tom's shotgun, and she floors it, engine roaring. We're tearing through Cumberland, streets empty, lights blurring. I'm braced against the seat, watching the rear, nothing yet, but my skin's prickling. Tom's saying, "River, get to the river," and Ellen nods, swerving toward the Potomac. I'm confused, yelling, "Why water?" She grits out, "It hates deep current, sometimes." We hit the bridge, tires humming, and I'm praying she's right, that it'll stop this thing. Halfway across, the truck lurches, something slams the bed, rocking us. I twist, see a tendril hooked around the tailgate, pulling. Ellen screams, "Hold on," and guns it, but it's climbing, mass heaving up, tendrils lashing. Tom grabs a tire iron, swings wild, and I'm kicking at it, boots slipping on wet flesh. It recoils, just enough, and we hit the far bank, skidding onto pavement. The tendril snaps free, and I hear a splash, big, angry, below. We don't stop, barreling down 68, Ellen white-knuckling the wheel. I'm shaking, blood dripping from a cut on my arm I didn't notice. Tom's quiet, staring out, and Ellen's muttering, "Might have bought us time." I'm not so sure. Feel it still, that weight, like it's not done. We pull into a truck stop, dawn breaking gray, and I'm gasping, thinking we're safe, maybe. Ellen kills the engine, and we sit there, waiting, listening. The cab's silent, just our breathing, and I'm replaying it. Jake's scream, the escape, my dumbass fishing trip. Ellen finally says, "It marks you." Doesn't let go. My heart sinks. She's not guessing she knows. I'm about to ask when the radio crackles, static, then Jake's voice, garbled, "Lucas, help." I lunge, smack it off, and Ellen's staring at me, eyes dark. It's not over. We're holed up in the truck stop, Ellen chain-smoking by the window, Tom pacing, and me slumped in a booth, staring at nothing. Dawn's full now, sun weak through the haze, but I'm not feeling saved. Every shadow's a tendril, every sound's that slither. I'm replaying Ellen's words, "Marks you," and it's sinking in. I'm screwed. Should have stayed in Annapolis, fished the bay, not poked around out here. My mistake was thinking I could handle the wild. Tom's muttering about going back for Jake, but Ellen shuts him down, harsh. "He's gone, kid. You saw it." I flinch. "Yeah, I saw, heard, can't unhear that scream." I'm picking at a napkin, tearing it to bits, and ask, "Why me? Why us?" Ellen exhales smoke, says, "Creek's old. Older than Cumberland. Takes what it wants. Fishermen, campers, anyone dumb enough to linger. Her brother went missing there, years back. Same deal, same terror. She tried warning me, and I blew it off. Cops roll in around noon. Someone found the truck, Jake's blood all over the ditch. They question us, and I'm stumbling through it. Creek, thing, running. They nod, write it off as a bear or a freak accident, but their eyes say they don't buy it. Ellen backs me up, voice flat, and Tom's silent, shell-shocked. They let us go, and I'm back in the escape, towed to town, trashed but drivable. Heading for Annapolis, Ellen's warning ringing. Don't stop till you're home. Drive's a blur, highway stretching endless, and I'm jumping at every splash from the roadside. Make it to my apartment, lock the door, and collapse, reeking of sweat and creek mud. Shower doesn't help. Feel it on me, that mark, like a stain I can't scrub off. Sleep's a no-go. I'm up all night, rod by the bed like it'll save me, listening for that gurgle. Morning comes, and I'm a wreck, bags under my eyes, hands shaky. Week later, I'm unpacking, find my tackle box in the escape, didn't notice the cops grab it. Open it, and there's a new photo, me by the creek, casting, snapped from the water. My breath stops, and I hear it. Faint, wet, gurgling, outside. Drop the box, grab my keys, and I'm out, driving nowhere, just moving. Radio's off, don't trust it, but the sound's following, seeping through the vents. I end up at the bay, sun setting, water calm. Figure I'll fish, clear my head. Stupid, I know, but it's all I've got. Cast a line, and the water's still, too still. Then it bubbles, slow, deliberate, and I'm backing up, rod falling. Tendrils break the surface, dark and slick, and I'm running, leaving the escape, everything. Hide in a bait shop, owner yelling, but I don't care. Lock myself in the bathroom, shaking. Phone buzzes, Ellen, texting, "You okay?" I type back, "No," and hear it, slithering, close, right outside. Door rattles, and I'm gripping the sink, whispering, "Should have listened." My big mistake was running. Didn't kill it, didn't end it, just pissed it off. Water drips from the ceiling, sour and cold, and the lock clicks open. Last thing I see is tendrils curling in, and I'm thinking Jake, Ellen, me, we're all just bait. Should have never gone near that creek. I remember the day I set out for that car camping trip like it was yesterday. A day when the mundane gave way to something unexplainably eerie. My name is Ryan Christopher. I'm 30 years old, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. When I decided to drive up to Maryland for a weekend away from the routine, I was seeking a brief escape from life's demands. The idea was simple: park my old car, transform it into a makeshift shelter, and immerse myself in nature. But from the moment I hit the highway, a disturbing feeling crept in, a subtle hint that this trip was about to turn into a truly scary ordeal. The drive up was filled with a mix of excitement and an undercurrent of anxiety that I couldn't quite shake off. Rolling hills, winding roads, and expansive skies made me feel small yet free. As I crossed into Maryland, the familiar landscapes morphed into something that felt oddly foreign and foreboding. I pulled over at a secluded clearing that looked perfect for car camping, a spot where the trees whispered secrets and the wind carried an eerie, almost unspoken warning. I couldn't help but feel that there was something out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to disturb the quiet beauty of the night. After settling into my car, which doubled as my humble abode for the weekend, I took a moment to appreciate the isolation of the place. The surrounding forest was dense, and the occasional rustle of leaves or distant cry of a night bird sent a shiver down my spine. I set up a small campfire outside, its flickering flames battling the encroaching darkness. Even though it was just me out there, the silence felt heavy, punctuated by unsettling gaps that made my heart beat faster. Every little sound echoed as if the wilderness was alive, ready to unveil a horror that was both real and surreal. I wasn't alone in spirit, either. Memories of my friends, like Sarah, Elaine, and Mark Benjamin, danced in my thoughts. Sarah, always the adventurous soul, would have laughed at the eerie silence, while Mark's cautious nature would have urged us to pack up and leave at the first sign of danger. Even though they weren't physically present on this trip, their contrasting personalities seemed to resonate in the ambience of the night. I recalled our countless adventures together, yet nothing had ever felt as foreboding as this moment. It was as if the world itself was warning me about the sinister events that were about to unfold, a warning in a language only the disturbed can understand. While the night slowly crept in, I busied myself with setting up some basics inside my car. The cramped space became a cocoon of sorts, shielding me from the ominous darkness outside. I played soft tunes on my old radio to mask the unsettling noises that nature seemed to be orchestrating. Still, even the music couldn't fully drown out the feeling that something wasn't right. I kept my eyes on the dark tree line, half expecting a figure to emerge from the shadows, a disturbing vision that would fit perfectly into one of those horror movies I'd once scoffed at. The atmosphere was undeniably tense, and every passing minute intensified the sense of impending dread. I decided to step outside for a walk, wanting to get a closer look at the surroundings. The cool air and the scent of damp earth filled my lungs as I meandered along a narrow, barely visible trail. With each step, I questioned my own bravery. Was I simply overthinking, or was there a genuine, scary presence lurking around? My footsteps crunched on gravel and dried leaves, creating a rhythm that somehow both comforted and disturbed me. I tried to laugh off the feeling, reminding myself that it was only the solitude of nature playing tricks on my mind. Yet the experience felt too raw, too real to dismiss as mere imagination. The deeper I ventured into the forest, the more the landscape transformed into a realm of the uncanny. The tall trees loomed overhead, their branches twisting into grotesque shapes against the dark sky. A heavy fog began to roll in unexpectedly, softening the edges of the world into a blurry, indistinct haze. In that moment, every sound, a branch snapping, a distant rustle, became a potential harbinger of horror. I couldn't shake the thought that I was not alone in that foggy silence. It was a scary and disturbing realization, one that made my skin crawl and my heart race uncontrollably, as if warning me to turn back. Back in my car, I tried to gather my thoughts and make sense of the strange sensations that had overcome me. I found solace in the flickering light of the campfire, yet even its warm glow couldn't fully repel the unsettling shadows dancing at the edges of my vision. I scribbled a few notes in my journal, capturing every detail as if I were documenting a first-hand account of a real-life horror story. The act of writing was both therapeutic and eerie, a means to confront the bizarre reality that was gradually settling around me. Every word I jotted down was laced with an inexplicable tension, a subtle reminder that I was on the brink of encountering something profoundly disturbing. As midnight approached, the silence grew even more oppressive. I sat by the fire, the night air chilling my bones, and reflected on how a simple camping trip could morph into a nightmarish ordeal. The experience was like something out of a twisted horror film, where each moment builds upon the last until terror becomes unavoidable. I couldn't help but wonder if I was the subject of an unseen observer's morbid curiosity. Was this eerie ambience a trick of nature, or had I unwittingly stepped into a scene crafted by some cruel twist of fate? The questions spun in my mind, each more disturbing than the last, creating a disconcerting melody of fear and fascination. I ended the night with a mix of determination and trepidation, unsure if I'd be able to sleep or if my mind would be haunted by the disturbing events that had already taken shape. Lying in the cramped confines of my car, I listened to the symphony of nocturnal sounds, each one a note in a chilling melody that hinted at greater horrors yet to come. I kept asking myself, is this really happening, or am I just caught up in a bad, scary dream? The line between reality and nightmare blurred in those long, sleepless hours, leaving me with a deep-seated unease. Even now, recounting these moments, I feel the lingering chill, a constant reminder that some nights are meant to unsettle you, making you question everything you once took for granted. I woke up at dawn with an uneasy feeling that clung to every fiber of my being. The remnants of a restless night still haunted me as I stepped out of my car. The air felt heavy, and the forest seemed to hold its breath in silence. As I inspected my surroundings, I noticed that the previously comforting isolation now bore an unsettling quality, a disturbing quiet that hinted something was off. I couldn't shake off the creeping sense that I was being watched. Even the early rays of sunlight failed to warm the chill of foreboding that had settled over this place. Have you ever felt like the world just turned upside down before your eyes? While making my way back to the car for breakfast, I observed odd disturbances around the campsite. Branches were misplaced, as if someone had brushed through in a hurry. My instincts screamed that I shouldn't dismiss these signs as mere tricks of nature. I debated whether to leave immediately or press on with a mix of dread and determination. Every decision felt heavy, weighed down by the prospect of something horrific waiting just beyond the next bend. I had to rely on my gut, even when logic argued otherwise. Can you imagine the terror of knowing something isn't right, but not being sure what to do? As the day progressed, the signs of disturbance grew more pronounced. The area around my car showed inexplicable marks on the ground, scratches and indentations that looked almost deliberate. My pulse quickened as I examined them, realizing that no natural occurrence could explain these odd formations. The overwhelming sense of horror that had begun to brew inside me was now intermingled with a deep-seated fear of the unknown. I felt torn between rational thought and an inexplicable, scary instinct that urged me to flee. Do you ever feel that inexplicable pull towards safety, even when curiosity holds you back? I decided it was time to secure my temporary shelter and make some important decisions. After a quick, jittery check of my supplies, I locked my car and moved some belongings to a safer spot. I couldn't shake the thought that these small disturbances were only the beginning of a much bigger nightmare. In that moment, every rational decision felt like a lifeline, a necessary step to ward off the looming horror. I weighed the pros and cons, stay put and face the unknown, or escape and risk leaving behind the answers to these bizarre signs. What would you do if you found yourself caught in such a predicament? While gathering my thoughts, I began to notice the first real signs of something sinister. A series of strange, almost deliberate, markings etched into the bark of a nearby tree caught my attention. These marks, sharp and irregular, seemed to tell a story of chaos and horror, a silent message left by an unknown hand. My heart pounded in my chest as I documented them in my journal, hoping to understand their meaning later. The disturbing scene felt as if it had leapt straight from a horror movie, blending reality with a surreal, scary twist that left me both intrigued and terrified. Have you ever encountered a mystery that left you questioning your own senses? The initial signs weren't limited to the physical. I began receiving unsettling messages in my mind. It was as though the oppressive atmosphere of the forest was communicating with me, warning me of impending danger. Each rustle of the wind carried with it an ominous whisper, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I started to question every little sound, every flicker of movement, as potential harbingers of something dreadful. Even though I tried to stay rational, the fear was palpable, a constant companion whispering that this was no ordinary camping trip. Would you trust your gut when every instinct screamed for you to run? In a desperate bid to reassure myself, I attempted to retrace my steps back to the small clearing. The journey, however, felt different now. Each step was burdened by an increasing sense of doom as I navigated through dense underbrush and tangled vines. I noticed fresh disturbances along the trail, as if something or someone had been there recently. The experience was as disturbing as it was surreal, with reality twisting into a narrative straight out of a scary horror tale. The isolation of the forest no longer felt like solitude. It felt like a trap. Can you feel that rush of adrenaline when danger is lurking just around the corner? By mid-afternoon, I had to make a critical decision. Should I venture deeper to uncover the source of these mysterious signs, or retreat to the safety of my car and wait for daylight to reveal more clues? I felt compelled to follow the trail, driven by a mix of dread and an insatiable need for answers. With every step into the darkened parts of the woods, the situation grew more intense and disturbing. I had to be cautious. Every decision could mean the difference between escaping a horror scenario or becoming entangled in it. Have you ever had to choose between your instincts and the lure of the unknown? As dusk began to settle over the forest, I found myself in a small clearing that exuded an eerie energy. The light faded rapidly, and every rustle of leaves or snap of a twig became magnified in the growing darkness. The events of the day had left me unsettled, and I could feel the tension mounting with each passing moment. In that critical hour, I realized that my simple camping trip had transformed into a journey into a disturbing world of problems and unsettling decisions. The horror of the situation was both palpable and real, leaving me to wonder if I could ever return to a life of normalcy. What would you do if you were in my shoes, caught between the desire to uncover the truth and the need to stay safe? A cold dread settled in my bones as I ventured deeper into the forest, where the ordinary transformed into a surreal nightmare. The air turned heavy, and every step was punctuated by an overwhelming feeling of vulnerability. I could almost taste the fear, a disturbing blend of adrenaline and raw terror. Out of nowhere, a faint, unearthly sound reverberated through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. I paused, heart pounding, wondering if the source was an animal or something far more sinister. The silence that followed was as deafening as it was ominous, and I couldn't help but feel that the horror was just beginning. As I moved forward, the landscape morphed into a labyrinth of twisted paths and shadowy clearings, each one promising a new, scary revelation. The once familiar forest now seemed like a distorted maze designed to disorient and trap me. My instincts screamed that I wasn't alone. An unseen presence lurked, its intentions unclear yet deeply disturbing. Every rustle of leaves and snap of a twig made my heart race faster, each sound a chilling reminder that danger was imminent. I pressed on, driven by a mixture of curiosity and the desperate need to understand what was happening around me. Could this be the moment when horror truly claimed its ground? The oppressive darkness thickened as I reached a narrow, overgrown trail. The trees here stood like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches intertwining overhead to form a natural canopy that smothered the light. I began to see inexplicable shapes moving in the peripheral vision, a flash of movement here, a shadow darting there. At that moment, I realized I wasn't just being watched, I was being stalked. The realization was both terrifying and disturbing, sending an icy wave of fear through me. I fumbled for my phone, half wishing for a comforting glow, but the device offered little solace in the face of such raw, unrelenting dread. A sudden, blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, making my blood run cold. It was a sound that defied explanation, a mix of agony and terror that shook the very core of my being. I froze, caught between the instinct to run and the overwhelming need to uncover the source of that scream. Every second felt like an eternity as I strained my ears to decipher any further clues in the disconcerting symphony of sounds. The forest around me seemed to lean in, as if eager to reveal its dark secret. I felt both a chilling horror and a disturbing fascination, like I was living through one of those scary stories I'd once dismissed as mere fiction. I decided to retrace my steps toward the clearing, hoping to find safety or at least a clue to what had just occurred. However, the forest was no longer welcoming. It morphed into a sinister maze where every turn brought a new threat. The path was littered with signs of struggle, disturbed foliage, broken branches, and mysterious, deep scratches on the bark of ancient trees. The realization that someone or something had been here before me added a layer of unsettling terror to the already charged atmosphere. I couldn't shake the thought that I was now a part of a story far too real and dangerous to ignore, a narrative of horror unfolding before my very eyes. In the dim light of dusk, I stumbled upon a clearing that looked more like a trap than a respite. There, amidst the overgrown grass, lay remnants of what appeared to be a hastily abandoned campsite. Tents were torn, belongings scattered, and an eerie silence enveloped the area like a shroud. It was as if the previous occupants had fled in terror, leaving behind an unsettling trail of evidence that something truly disturbing had occurred. I knelt down to inspect a small, broken charm that lay near a smoldering fire pit, a token that hinted at rituals or warnings best left unexplained. Every detail deepened the feeling of impending doom and a horror that was all too real. As the night began to wrap its cold fingers around the landscape, I felt a sinister energy pulsing through the ground beneath me. The forest seemed to hum with a disturbing life of its own, an energy that was both ancient and malevolent. I couldn't ignore the nagging sensation that I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, a moment when the terror would fully break free. The growing intensity of every sound, every shadow, was a stark reminder that I was caught in a web of escalating horror. I tried to steady my breath and focus, but the creeping dread made it nearly impossible to think clearly. Was I truly ready for what was coming next? Then, in a moment that defied all logic, I caught sight of a figure in the distance. At first, it was just a vague outline against the darkening sky, but as I squinted, the features began to emerge, distorted, contorted, and disturbingly human. The figure moved slowly, its gait unsteady as if burdened by an unseen weight. I felt an intense mix of curiosity and fear that propelled me forward, despite every instinct urging me to flee. The closer it got, the more I realized that this was no ordinary camper. Something was deeply wrong here. The presence exuded a palpable aura of menace, a scary and disturbing forewarning that I was about to cross into a realm of terror I couldn't have imagined. In that charged moment, as I locked eyes with the approaching figure, every rational thought dissolved into a rush of adrenaline and fear. The encounter was brief, yet transformative, a moment where time seemed to slow, and the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred. I could see the pain and horror etched into its face, a silent scream frozen in time. The figure vanished almost as quickly as it had appeared, leaving behind a haunting silence that screamed of unresolved terror and a future fraught with danger. My mind raced with questions, each more disturbing than the last. Who, or what, was that? And what did its appearance mean for the horrifying journey that lay ahead? My heart hammered against my ribcage as I realized that staying in that cursed clearing meant certain doom. With the figure's presence burning in my mind, I knew I had to move, fast. I retraced my steps in a desperate bid to escape the suffocating horror that had overtaken the forest. Every snap of a twig underfoot felt like a countdown to disaster. The oppressive silence was shattered by my pounding heartbeat and ragged breaths, each moment fraught with the raw terror of impending danger. I couldn't shake the disturbing thought. Was this frantic flight the only way to survive? Or was I already too entangled in a nightmare from which there was no return? Panic surged through me as I darted through the underbrush, my mind racing with images of the distorted figure and the eerie campsite I had left behind. The forest had transformed into a deadly maze, each shadow and rustle amplifying the sense of a predator closing in. I zigzagged through the trees, relying on instinct rather than reason. Every step felt like a battle against both the physical terrain and the creeping horror that clung to me. I could almost hear the sinister whispers of the forest urging me to slow down, to surrender to the terror. Yet, in that life and death moment, the only choice was to keep running, no matter how disturbing the path ahead seemed. The escape grew more frantic as night deepened, and the forest's horrors became more pronounced. My legs burned with exertion, and every breath came out as a ragged plea for survival. I could sense that something was following, a relentless, scary presence that made the very air feel charged with malice. My car, parked at a distance, seemed like a beacon of hope in a world gone mad. The thought of returning to that confined metal cocoon, where safety was almost tangible, spurred me on. I stumbled over unseen roots and evaded gnarled branches, each misstep a disturbing reminder of the danger lurking in every dark corner. Desperation mounted with every passing second as the forest around me morphed into a sinister labyrinth of fear. The once familiar trails had dissolved into confusing pathways, each turn seemingly leading to a dead end of terror. I remembered fragments of advice from past camping trips: stay calm, trust your instincts, and keep moving. But nothing could prepare me for this overwhelming sense of impending doom. The sound of my own frantic heartbeat was deafening, each beat a reminder of the scary life-or-death situation I was in. I paused momentarily in a small clearing, catching my breath, and scanned the darkness for any sign of reprieve, but the disturbing shadows offered no comfort. In a flash, I saw movement, a shape flitting just beyond the reach of the feeble moonlight. I froze, terror clutching my throat, as the disturbing realization dawned on me that I was not only being hunted, but that my escape was being closely watched. The figure, now unmistakably following me, moved with a slow, deliberate pace that defied logic. Every instinct screamed to hide, yet the urge to flee was stronger. I pressed myself against the rough bark of a towering oak, trying to become one with the night. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft, unnerving sound of footsteps drawing nearer, a horrifying reminder that the pursuit was relentless and real. The fear of being caught transformed every instinct into a raw, urgent need to survive. I bolted from my hiding place, the adrenaline surging through me as I sprinted toward the direction of my car. The path was treacherous, riddled with obstacles that now seemed designed to trap me in this nightmare. My mind raced with disturbing thoughts. What if the figure was not alone? What if the forest itself was conspiring against me? Each step was a struggle against an overwhelming terror that blurred the lines between reality and a twisted, scary hallucination. The night echoed with my desperate footfalls and the haunting sound of pursuit, creating a chilling symphony of life and death. As I neared the spot where I'd left my car, a surge of hope battled the persistent fear. The distant glimmer of headlights in my rearview mirror provided a fragile sense of safety. But the relief was short-lived. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, and a disturbing presence loomed at the edge of my vision. In a split-second decision, I dove into the car, slamming the door shut behind me as I fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, a desperate, mechanical heartbeat that offered a temporary sanctuary from the relentless horror outside. Yet, even as I drove, the fear of that pursuing figure and the disturbing memories of the forest haunted every turn of the wheel. Speeding down the narrow, winding road, I couldn't shake the disturbing feeling that escape was a fragile illusion. The forest's dark silhouette receded behind me, but its eerie whispers lingered in the back of my mind like a persistent nightmare. Every intersection, every twist in the road, felt like a potential trap set by a malicious force. I kept my eyes on the road, hands gripping the steering wheel as if it were a lifeline in a sea of terror. The disturbing events of the night merged into a blur of horror and adrenaline, a reminder that I was now fleeing not just the physical dangers of a haunted forest, but also the deep, unsettling terror that had taken root in my soul. Even as the city lights of Maryland began to twinkle in the distance, my mind remained trapped in the nightmare of that pursuit. The calm of civilization was a stark contrast to the life-and-death terror I had just experienced, yet the feeling of being followed persisted. The disturbing memories of that night clung to me as tenaciously as the chill in the air. I wondered if the horrors of the forest would ever let me go, or if I would forever be haunted by the terrifying presence that had pushed me to the brink of death. The drive felt endless, a continuous battle between the urge to forget and the compelling need to remember every scary, disturbing detail of that fateful escape. The journey that began with a spark of adventure had spiraled into a nightmare of inescapable horror. I sat in the back of my car, heart still pounding, as the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon. In that quiet moment, the weight of what had transpired hit me like a tidal wave of regret and despair. The escape had been narrow, but the events of the night left an indelible mark on my soul, a disturbing reminder that sometimes the pursuit of a simple camping trip can lead to a series of deadly mistakes. Every scar, every shudder, served as proof of a tragedy that I could never unsee. Have you ever felt that the choices you make in a moment of terror can haunt you for a lifetime? As I tried to piece together the fragments of my shattered reality, the eerie silence of the early morning clashed with the cacophony of memories from the night before. I replayed every step, every decision, wondering if a different choice could have prevented the unfolding horror. The disturbing encounter with the twisted figure and the relentless pursuit through the dark forest were not just isolated incidents. They were part of a chain reaction that ended in irreversible loss. In that grim aftermath, I recognized that my desperate flight had come at a terrible cost. The realization that my own actions had paved the way for tragedy was a burden too heavy to bear. Can you imagine the crushing weight of regret in a moment when survival feels just out of reach? The morning light brought little comfort, only deepening the surreal contrast between the peaceful day and the disturbing chaos of the previous night. I drove in a daze, the road ahead blurring into an endless tunnel of regret and sorrow. Every familiar landmark seemed to mock my attempt to return to normalcy, reminding me that nothing would ever be the same again. The memories of that night, etched in vivid, haunting detail, served as a grim reminder that the pursuit of a thrill can sometimes lead to irreversible consequences. I found myself questioning if the price of this adventure was simply too high. Have you ever looked back and wished you could rewrite the events that changed everything? In the hours that followed, I tried to reach out to those I once trusted for solace, only to find that the disturbing events had isolated me in a cocoon of fear and uncertainty. Friends like Sarah, Elaine, and Mark Benjamin, who had once shared in the joy of adventure, now felt like distant echoes of a past life. Their voices, filled with concern and disbelief, were a stark contrast to the solitary terror that had consumed my night. The horror of the experience was compounded by the realization that I was now alone with the haunting memories, a tragic reminder that some experiences leave you irrevocably changed. Do you think it's possible to ever escape the clutches of a night filled with such unrelenting fear? I decided to return to the spot where it all began, driven by a desperate need for closure and an understanding of the dark forces that had orchestrated the terror. The forest, bathed in the cold light of morning, looked eerily calm, a disturbing facade hiding the violent chaos of the night before. As I walked through the familiar trails, every broken twig and disturbed leaf whispered secrets of a deadly encounter. The realization that the night's events were not merely figments of a scared mind, but real, unyielding horrors, left me trembling. Each step forward was a painful reminder of the fine line between survival and surrender. Can you feel the tension as every memory resurfaces in a stark confrontation with reality? The cost of that fateful night began to reveal itself in unexpected ways. I discovered that my car, which had been my lifeline in the chaos, bore scratches and marks that told a story of its own, a story of struggle and escape that was etched into its metal. Each imperfection was like a painful memento of the relentless pursuit that had pushed me to the brink. It was as if the very vehicle that had provided a temporary sanctuary now served as a permanent reminder of a deadly mistake. The fusion of fear, regret, and the raw urgency of survival mingled into a disturbing cocktail of emotions. Have you ever held on to an object that carried memories of a time when you were forced to fight for your life? As I finally reached the outskirts of civilization, the normalcy of daily life felt surreal, almost mocking, compared to the raw horror I had endured. The comforting hum of everyday routines clashed with the vivid recollections of terror that continued to haunt me. Each familiar face in the crowd was a reminder that life went on, indifferent to the tragedies that unfolded in the shadows. Yet, deep inside, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. The disturbing events of that night had carved a permanent niche in my memory, a tragic lesson in the unforeseen consequences of stepping into the unknown. Can you imagine returning to a life that feels both familiar and terrifyingly alien? In the quiet aftermath, I found myself questioning the very nature of fear and its power to shape our lives. The line between bravery and folly blurred, as I wondered if my relentless pursuit of the thrill had led me to a place where horror reigned supreme. The night's terror had transformed into a bittersweet memory, a disturbing reminder that even in moments of escape, the shadows of the past can reach out and pull you back. Each heartbeat resonated with the lessons learned in that deadly night, urging me to tread carefully on the fragile boundary between adventure and catastrophe. Have you ever felt that the pursuit of excitement can sometimes lead you down a path of irreversible regret? As the final moments of that harrowing night faded into memory, I was left with a stark realization. Some experiences are too disturbing, too scary, to ever be truly left behind. The tragic events in that Maryland forest had forever altered the course of my life, weaving a tale of horror that was as real as it was terrifying. I carried those memories like a heavy shroud, a constant reminder of a deadly mistake that would forever haunt me. In the quiet solitude of the morning, with the first rays of light piercing through the gloom, I accepted that some wounds never heal. They simply fade into the background, only to resurface when least expected.